I'm going to open our meeting and advise everyone who's present that the audio and video of this meeting is being recorded and live streamed to the community via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. For the purposes of recording, if elected members could wait for me to announce them before speaking, and I request that all mobile devices be turned off or put to silent. We have all elected members here, bar Councillor Fox, who shouldn't be too far away. I think it's not an apology. There's no apology there. So there are no leave of absences, and there's no apology. So I'd like to start by acknowledging to country. In recognition of the deep history and culture of this place, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which the City of Hobart was built. I'd like to acknowledge the determination and resilience of the Palawa people of Tasmania, who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, their culture and their rights. Thank you. The minutes of our last meeting were the 20th of September, moved by Deputy Lord Mayor.
Yes, so moved, Lord Mayor. They seem to be correct.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis. Any changes or modifications to the minutes? There being none, I'll put those minutes to be accepted. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. That's carried unanimously. Transfer of agenda items. Are there any items proposed for transfer on the agenda? Being none. Communications from the Chair. I do have a couple, so I'd like to just go through some of those. So the first one I wanted to report back to Council on was that on last Friday the 8th of October, I joined the Senator for Tasmania, the Honourable Erica Betts, at the John Kennedy Hobart Aquatic Centre to announce that we have been successful in receiving a $3.4 million grant from the federal government under round 5 of the Building Better Regions Fund program. This money will go towards the delivery of a fully accessible warm water therapy pool and accessible spa at the centre. The Tasmanian government had already committed to provide $3 million and Council had committed $400,000 for this project, so this now means the $6.8 million project is fully funded. The project will deliver significant social and economic benefits to the city, including improving the quality of life for older people, people with disabilities or injuries, and people with health conditions such as arthritis. Cost savings to the health system through the availability of hydrotherapy treatments to maintain better health. It will also provide increased ability for the state to deliver hydrotherapy programs and employment and training opportunities for therapists, carers and support workers. Over the term of this council, we have undertaken significant lobbying for this project, culminating in more than 100 letters, many face-to-face meetings with both federal and state politicians, 3 funding submissions, and it was part of our 2019 federal election portfolio and our CCLM COVID-19 infrastructure priority project list. So it has been a great effort by all, and a lot of words written and spoken in order to get this project funded. I did want to particularly thank our federal member for Clark, Andrew Wilkie, who wrote several letters of support and made numerous verbal interventions to the various ministers through the last couple of years. The warm water pool could not have happened without all levels of government, so I'd like to just acknowledge and thank everyone for that. And of course this new project will build on the significant upgrades that the Council has already undertaken itself. About $5.8 million the Council has spent in upgrades already. That includes the new children's area and plant room equipment, and we still have $2 million that we have committed for future works. Since our last meeting, we did have, as far as intergovernmental relations meetings, the CEO and I met with the Honourable Elise Archer MP on the 21st of September in her capacity as member for Clark, and we talked about doing Kennedy Aquatic Centre funding, so that was one of those many meetings. funding opportunities for the Kunani Mount Wellington Pinnacle Road Guardrail project, the Smart Bus Shelter project for Clark, social food delivery regulation and Hobart development. There was also the Greater Hobart Strategic Partnership meeting on the 21st of September. So that's the 4 Greater Hobart mayors and CEOs, and at that meeting there was a discussion about bus stop infrastructure and the looming DDA compliance deadline of 2022 for bus stop infrastructure in Greater Hobart, the update on the launch of the Greater Hobart Vision and the Metro Plan, which is coming, and a presentation from Communities Tasmania on social housing. And finally, on the 8th of October, as part of Legat, the Deputy Lord Mayor, as my proxy, participated in a workshop of the General Management Committee of Legat about the state government's local government reform process. At the meeting, there was a discussion about feedback from the Minister about the local government reform process. Key risks for Legat, risks and opportunities were identified and discussed, and arrangements made for the consultation, broader consultation with the sector. The GMC of Legat agreed that a special general meeting with all councils represented will be held on the 4th of November, where the Minister for Local Government will also be present. It will be in Devonport. Legat will also be sending out a letter to all Tasmanian local government elected representatives shortly, providing an update on the process to date and outlining Legat's discussions with the Minister. Thank you, everyone. Okay, item 4 is notification of council workshops, and there have been none since our last meeting. Item 5 is public question time, and we do have a number of public questions. So I will start just in order of the questions being received. I will start with a question from Mr. Edwin Johnston and ask Mr. Johnston to come to the microphone and ask his question. Thank you, Mr. Johnston.
From the 1st of July, 828 parking spots in Salamanca and the inner CBD rose by 42% to $5 an hour. This dramatic rise by 42% has affected local visitors. We all know tourist numbers are down, so now more than ever we need local shoppers into the city, not less. The council plans to net this financial year $8.2 million in on-street parking revenue. Last year's budget forecast, it would have been $6.6 million. The council is blaming COVID on a budget shortfall, but council revenues did not decrease by 42% and now are returning to pre-COVID levels. So why should shoppers, and by extension traders, bear the brunt of the 42% rise? Public perception to the affordability of a visit to Hobart is sadly at an all-time low. We need permanent, not temporary solutions to make a visit to Hobart more attractive and not less. So my 2 questions are, 1, will the City of Hobart permanently reduce a 42% increase to $5 an hour to on-street parking in Salamanca and the inner CBD to entice local shoppers back? Number 2, will the City of Hobart raise parking prices in the future to a figure more closely aligned to CPI so as not to deter future visitation to Hobart?
Thank you, Mr. Johnston. I'm going to provide a written this response, and this will also be posted to you as well. Thank you. So the majority, almost 60% of paid on-street bays across the city of Hobart cost $3 an hour or less. These prices are set after being assessed on a bay-by-bay basis for historical occupancy and demand. Furthermore, many bays in the CBD had a decrease in pricing in the 2021-22 budget following a year of no price increases at all, and the majority of the $5 zones in the CBD incurred increases of 16%. So they increased from $4.20, not 42% after a year. And this was after a year or sometimes 2 years of no increases. Despite significant increases in demand over the corresponding periods, there were no price increases in Salamanca for 2 years, which was 2019-20, 2020-21, in either on-street or off-street services. There was also an increase in 15-minute zones. Fees and charges, including pricing for on-street and off-street parking services, are set annually by the Council in consideration of a range of factors including service demand, location, cost of council service delivery and other economic conditions. The City has been and will continue to undertake specific economic development campaigns in these areas in support of the City's local businesses. While CPI is one of the key demand factors in determining parking pricing across the City, the cost of council service delivery often exceeds increases in CPI. However, the City is committed to continual monitoring and evaluation of parking operations across the City as evidence-based input into development of the draft City Parking Policy. This policy will be available for public consultation in 2022 and will include information about the introduction of variable and dynamic pricing for on-street and off-street parking services. Thank you. We'll post that to you. Okay, now I have a question from Ms. Jane Wilson.
Lord Mayor, CEO and councillors, thanks for the opportunity to speak at this meeting. My question concerns the approval of 37 kilometres of new mountain bike tracks in the foothills of Canani, Mount Wellington. Of critical importance to my question is the fact that the eastern face of Canani, Hobart City Council's freehold land, is a national park in all but name. A reminder here that this land is set aside to preserve and protect its natural and cultural values. I believe the evidence shows that the Director City Amenity and the Manager Bushland have lost sight of this imperative. The public record of relevant Parks and Recreation Council Committee meeting agendas since January 2016 reveals that City Amenity staff members always justify their Canani infrastructure development proposals primarily on economic grounds. It appears to me that the Director, City Amenity and Manager Bushland see their role as making sure Canani is a cash cow for Hobart. This is perhaps not surprising, as Council City Amenity receives government grant funding to build mountain bike tracks, and Council policy aligns with the State Government's economic tourism T21 policy. It's all about attracting more visitors and more money to Canani. In short, I posit that the Director City Amenity and the Manager Bushland possibly see themselves as akin to developers. I hope, CEO, if you're looking at this, you will talk with external experts and stakeholders qualified in gold standard recreation planning to find out the truth of the matter. The 15th of October 2020 Parks and Rec meeting was a critical meeting which recommended approval.
Ms Wilson, we do have a limit on 60 seconds.
That was the background, okay. I'll move on to my question. Thanks.
Just go on to your 4 questions if you wouldn't mind, thank you.
Okay, this is the question. On 26th of October 2020, Council approved the City Amenities Riding the Mountain plan for the stage construction of 20 new mountain bike tracks, total 37 kilometres, in the foothills of Canani, following a recommendation from the Parks and Rec Committee. I believe that despite the best intentions of the Director City Amenity and the Manager Bushland, Riding the Mountain, October 2020, represents a failure of good planning and needs to go back to the drawing board. My question is in 4 parts. Can I be provided with evidence showing how Riding the Mountain, a proposal for building 37 kilometres of new tracks, would not cause habitat loss, degradation and fragmentation? Can I be provided with evidence, second part, can I be provided with evidence that shows that the Riding the Mountain public consultation process sought and obtained input from representative samples of all the different types of Kanani's recreational users, including walkers. Third part, how was the appointment of the company Dirt Art Proprietary Limited as consultant to the Riding the Mountain project appropriate, given that this company has a vested interest in designing and building mountain bike tracks? Part 4, have city amenity staff members ever discussed using state and federal government grant funds to construct mountain bike tracks in city lands which are not nature reserves? Thanks.
So in response to question 1, the Biodiversity Action Plan that you referred to was you... Of course, this will be provided in writing, yes. So the Biodiversity Action Plan was used to inform the location of Riding the Mountain proposed track corridors, and detailed assessments of the trails were made as part of the development application process. Copies of the detailed environmental impact studies undertaken to support the planning application were part of the council report and are available on the council website, but we will include copies of those environmental assessment reports in this response to you, so you have copies of them. Question 2. Evidence of the degree of consultation is contained within the council report that's on the 15th of October 2020. So attachment B of the report of that date outlines the community engagement process and the detailed feedback received from riders, trail runners, bushwalkers and individuals. Question 3, the City of Hobart has a rigorous procurement policy that meets specific local government statutory obligations. The selection of Dirt Art was subjected to this procurement process. Dirt Art was selected from a competitive process because of their expertise and qualifications and experience of designing recreational trails. Question 4, the Wellington Park Act 1993 clearly identifies a different objective for the management of the multi-tenured Wellington Park, and it is deliberately not declared a national park or a nature reserve under the National Parks and Wildlife Act 1970. The Riding the Mountain plan and the tracks in question are all located entirely within the designated recreation zone of Wellington Park. The master plan seeks to establish a platform for the development of Greater Hobart as a recreational hub for innovative riding opportunities. The city pursues all opportunities to secure grant funding from the state and federal governments. Applications in respect to the establishment of mountain bike trails have been successful. So we'll provide those responses and those documents that we've referred to in the response to you. Yes, Ms Wilson, we've...
Thanks. Just wondering what the procedure is if you don't agree with the answer.
Potentially come back and ask another question another night, but we do have quite a number of other questions, so... Okay. Now we have a question from Mr. Brett Hanson. Mr. Hanson, would you like to come forward?
Thank you. Dear Council members, Hobart City Council Stormwater Planning question in 2 parts. Part 1, what planning rule gives the Hobart City Council authority to impose a stormwater retention system on a single house planning application after the subdivision has successfully obtained title, including provision of stormwater connection facilities to roadway gutter? Part 2, why does Council not take responsibility to upgrade inadequate stormwater infrastructure? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hanson. So in response to question number 1, the City of Hobart has the right under the Hobart Interim Planning Scheme to maintain stormwater runoff to no greater than pre-existing runoff, or to require the upgrade the upgrade of the public stormwater infrastructure in order to ensure that the application does not have a negative impact on the downstream public stormwater system and properties. In respect to a subdivision such as Bluestone Rise, as part of the approval process, the developer was able to shift the retention obligation to the individual lots via a Part 5 agreement. This approach has also been taken at a number of other recent developments. Question 2, the city manages its stormwater infrastructure under a renewal-based, focus-led by condition assessment of existing asset and system inundation modelling. New and upgrade works are considered if and when the need arises. Works associated with the position of the city's existing stormwater network are always subject to available funding. So we'll also provide that written response to you in writing. Thank you. Okay, now we have our fourth question from Ms. Louise Bloomfield. Ms. Bloomfield.
The release of quantitative data on parking would be appreciated and allow the public to better participate in rational debate. Many surveys by the Council have shown the value of unique small businesses in and around the city. Yet these same businesses, many of which are struggling, feel ignored and undervalued. The ability to access customer base is essential. Last council meeting, a report into the comparison of parking between North Hobart and the rest of the city was released. Now, page 50 of the supplementary agenda, Monday the 20th of September 2021, item 16, shows a graph marked figure 2. All cities versus North Hobart occupancy comparison. These are my questions. 1. Please precisely define the occupancy metric used in the graph, all cities versus North Hobart occupancy comparison. 2. From examining the all cities versus North Hobart occupancy comparison chart, it appears just when it was made public back in June 2021 that the fees were increasing, that occupancy had started to decline. The decline continued significantly to the end of the chart's range and appears to be close to a 10% decline in occupancy. Could the council please clarify these numbers? Being a visual chart rather than a series of numbers, we'd like to know precisely. 3, what percentage of the council metered parking bays are $5 per hour? I think you might have answered that earlier. 4, are road users able to identify the metered parking prices from their vehicle before committing to a parking in a park? 5, when paying your parking meter, you used to be able to insert money in 10-cent increments. Now the increments displayed on the meters appear almost random. What is the basis of these increments? 6, does the council acknowledge that parking rates and variable increments being both unknown until the driver is committed to parking space and engaged with the parking meter, as well as the worrying propensity for the parking sensor to supply conflicting information, which can result in the fact you get a parking fine and you have to go and fight that anyway, is creating significant alienation of the road users, and thus they are now avoiding parking in the Hobart City Council altogether. 7, does the council admit that its management of parking has led to financial hardship of small businesses, such as those in North Hobart Strip? 8, discounted parking has led to improved trading conditions. Is the parking strategy now going to be reassessed with this new data, valuing the local area requirements of small businesses in the Hobart Council area, so that they are able to trade in the difficult economic climate? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Bloomfield. So just bear with me with the responses to the 8 questions, and they will be sent to you, so you may want to study them in closer detail when you've got them in front of you, but I'll just read them out in any case. So question 1, in assessing the comparison of actual data captured by the sensors, the information was split to show 2 areas. All city, in inverted commas, which includes all metered and non-metered parking spaces with a sensor installed, including North Hobart, and North Hobart, which was limited to the Elizabeth Street strip from Burnett to Federal Street. The data shows the average daily occupancy percentage across business hours, 8 a.m. till 6 p.m, including all spaces for both areas. Daily occupancy percentage is the number of spaces that have a vehicle detected by a sensor each hour as a percentage of total number of spaces that have sensors equipped. So question 2. Occupancy began to decline in April prior to meter installation. This aligns with annual parking trends typical to the city's traditional winter downturn. As detailed in the report, this is further compounded by a range of other factors and was not limited to the North Hobart shopping strip. There was an average decline in occupancy of 3.14% over a 3-month period from 1st of June to the 31st of August. Question 3. 41.8% of metered parking bays are charged at $5 per hour, and 58.2% of all on-street parking bays are $3 or less an hour. Question 4. Parking control signage is designed in accordance with Australian standards and to comply with the Australian road rules. Accordingly, prices are not displayed. Signs are designed to enable persons to quickly identify the core restriction whilst driving or parking. Putting parking rates on the sign would add to clutter and confusion, especially in areas with variable tariffs. Pricing is and always has been displayed on the physical meters or voucher machines. Question 5. 10-cent coins can still be used to increase the time purchased on parking meters. Traditional meters were activated by coin and restricted to their mechanical systems. Most meters in use in Hobart since the 1960s have not accepted 5-cent coins due to the small size and weight causing issues with clockwork mechanisms. The 10-cent coin was therefore the smallest usable currency. Depending on the cost per hour and the restriction, 10 cents will buy somewhere between 1 minute 20 seconds up to 10 minutes. The introduction of card payments enabled the city to switch to purchasing time in time increments. The user selects how much time they require in incremental blocks of 15 minutes. The default time purchased is 15 minutes. This can be adjusted down to 10-cent minimum purchase value or increased up to the maximum allowable for that space by using the keypad. For coin operation, the quantity of time still increases solely based on the value of the coin inserted. The meter accepts all coins from 10 cents and up. New meters are able to accept 50 coins for the first time since meters were introduced. Question 6. There has been no change to the way road users interact with the parking infrastructure up to the point they operate the individual types of meter. Tariffs have never been displayed on signage in meter or voucher controlled areas. Each meter has the pricing and parking restriction information clearly displayed as per the requirements of the Local Government Highways Act 1982. The city has already acknowledged there were communication and network issues in specific city locations during the initial implementation of the system in 2018. These caused delays in retrieving bay information. This was ultimately identified as a specific communications tower network issue and resolved by the parking meter provider and the telecommunications provider. Question 7. As already identified in the previous report, Council continues to work with all stakeholders to manage the complex and competing requirements of the North Hobart business community and broader community. This has included a significant increase in the volume of free and reduced price parking in North Hobart in recent years, a year of zero price increases and a range of service and financial support measures to those businesses affected by the current economic environment. And question 8, in the 15 days since the meters were hooded in Elizabeth Street, North Hobart, the number of vehicle detections in these bays has increased by 5% compared to the immediately preceding period. This increase has been offset by an increase in overstays, which has the opposite effect of reducing turnover in the area. The City is committed to the continual monitoring and evaluation of the parking operations in North Hobart and across the City over the coming months as part of an evidence-based input into the development of the draft City parking policy, and this will be made available for public consultation in 2022. Thank you. All right, and now the final series of questions. I'll invite Ms. Louise Elliott to step forward.
There are a few parts to my question as well, I'm sorry, but my question relates to the Council's debt and how it prioritises its expenditure. The Council's budget estimates state that as of 30 June 2021, the Council was in over $66 million in debt and that over $2 million in interest will be incurred this year. The Council's long-term financial management plan forecasts debt to increase to $70 million and that the debt won't be cleared until 2040. The Council has recently raised rates and fees despite housing costs being the highest we've ever seen and businesses struggling and the broader community struggling with the ongoing economic impacts of COVID. In this context, can the Council please advise how the Council intends to pay this debt back, such as through further rates and fee increases and/or the creation of additional income streams, such as further parking restrictions, and/or finding savings and carefully prioritising its expenditure towards core services? How much interest is expected to be accrued over the total life of this debt? Why has it not been possible for the Council to manage its expenditure so that the Council does not go into debt, like the Clarence City Council, which has zero debt? What projects have been identified within the City Amenity and City Innovation divisions but are unlikely or unable to proceed this financial year due to insufficient funds being available, such as the installation of water fountains and bottle fillers on the waterfront, which can help reduce the impact of plastics but cannot proceed without external funding? And also how the Council views the following sample of expenditure items as a sound investment at any time, but especially given the Council's current financial position. Payments of $10,000 for poems to be placed on buses for 4 months, $5,000 to teach a small selection of people how to DJ, $13,200 on a runway performance that aims to remind us that we are all beautiful, $5,000 for barbershop singing, $3,000 for a prisoner's art exhibition, $5,000 for dancing that responds to the rivulet, $15,000 for an art walking tour that's available for 3 days. These items are only a sample of what many view as highly questionable use of ratepayer funds, particularly given the Council's financial situation and that the state government already provides over $5 million in grants each year through Arts Tasmania and Screen Tasmania. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions, Ms Elliott, and given the in-depth nature of them and the range of other questions that were received, and I think your questions came in today, I will need to take your questions on notice today and provide you with a written response in due course. A copy of the response will be sent to you, but also will be provided in a future Council agenda for the Council to receive and note. Thank you. Okay, so now 5.2 is responses to public questions taken on notice. This is a number of questions that were taken on notice and are in the agenda tonight. So could you move those, be received and noted? Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Barakis. All those in favour say aye. Aye. It's carried unanimously. Now, item 6 is petitions, and I'll hand over to the CEO who will provide details on the petitions received.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This evening, Lord Mayor, we have 3 petitions. The first one is from Mrs. Rose Farrell of Sandy Bay. The action required or sought by the petitioners reads as follows: that a new bus shelter be made available as soon as possible. Many local people are elderly and casino clients also use this metro bus service. Some younger people have been observed sitting on the brick edge of the new garden where the shelter used to be while they now wait for a bus. And a total number of signatories, Lord Mayor, for this petition is 80. The second petition received this evening, Lord Mayor, is from Mr. Edwin Johnston of 83 Salamanca Place, Battery Point. The purpose of the petition, or that which is sought, is as follows. Where the business owners and visitors to Hobart petitioned the Hobart City Council to immediately drop the maximum on-street parking rate in the city from $5 an hour to $3. We also ask for no further rises above CPI until a detailed report on the impacts of parking costs are having on businesses and visitor numbers to the city are published and consulted on. And again, Lord Mayor, the total number of signatories to the petition are 3,784. The next question here is regarding petition is Miss Eileen Smith from Goulburn Street, West Hobart, and the matter relates to trees. And the action required is that the Domain Tennis Centre is seeking compensation for the above works to the sum of $16,000. This is the amount required to fix the root problem and install a root barrier. The details of this have been included in 4 letters to Council, and again, Lord Mayor, the total number of signatories to the petition are 128. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Deputy
I move that those be referred to the specific committee for further consideration.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock. All those in favour for those to be referred to committees with a report to come back to us, say aye. Aye. Against, say no. It's carried unanimously. Okay, moving on now to supplementary items. Are there any supplementary items, CEO?
No, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Item 8 is indications of pecuniary or conflicts of interest. Do any elected members wish to indicate an interest in any item appearing on the open council agenda?
Yeah, 9.5.
Alderman Zirko's 9.5. I'll declare an interest in item 12. If that's everyone, we'll move on now to the City Planning Committee. I note now that the council is now acting as a planning authority, and I'll invite Deputy Lord Mayor to introduce item 9.1, temporary installations.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll move this item, 9.1.
Seconded by Councillor Fox.
Lord Mayor, this item is seeking Council's delegation to the Director of City Planning just in relation to this temporary installation under the Summons Cove Planning Scheme, and it is in relation to the imminent arrival of RSV Nuyina, which is set to arrive to come to its home port on Saturday, the 16th of October, so this Saturday. And so after a 24,000 kilometre journey from the Netherlands, the Nuyina will be arriving, and essentially there are various temporary installations of multiple public art installations called elements. I don't think that we have to pay for this, Lord Mayor, with some of these elements also comprising signage at multiple locations around the subject site. So a lot of this will be interpretation using artificial intelligence and very visual installations, and it's really celebrating Antarctic exploration and heritage around the Hobart waterfront as Australia's Antarctic gateway, Lord Mayor.
Any discussion? No discussion. I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, say no. Carried unanimously. Item 9.2 is 2 Sayer Crescent, 2A Sayer Crescent, 54 Maryville Esplanade and 52 Maryville Esplanade, Sandy Bay.
Yes, Lord Mayor, this is recommended for refusal for this, so I'll move that.
Seconded by Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, the application is for demolition of a art and craft house, a new building. It's a 2-storey art and craft house, a new building for 14 multiple dwellings and associated works at 2 Sayer Crescent, and it's including works within the road reserve at 2 Sayer Crescent, 2A Sayer Crescent, 52 and 54 for Murrayville Esplanade and the adjacent road reserve. So, as I said, it's the demolition of the existing house and which I think is apartments now, an outbuilding with the northeastern corner, within the northeastern corner of the site, and the removal of a large false cypress tree, which looks like it's already dying, unfortunately. So the construction of a new building on the property, 14 multiple dwellings across 4 levels with a height of 14.8 metres with the top of to the top of a proposed lift overrun, and the proposed multiple dwellings would be apartment style dwellings. There's predominantly 3-bedroom apartments, but there are some 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in this proposal. So it had quite a number of conditions in relation to this. So it was some discretions as part of the inner residential zone, so density, setbacks, building envelope, site coverage, private open space, sunlight and overshadowing, privacy and waste storage. There were concerns about landslide, major works because of a landslide risk, and so forth, and parking and access, stormwater management. The committee, so the recommendation was for approval from officers, and there was support, broadly supportive from a glance from like a review by the Urban Design Advisory Panel, which was requested unusually by the applicant. So the City Planning Committee had concerns about the density and impacts arising from the building's height and bulk. It is outside of the building envelope, and that, as well as the density, was of major concern. The traffic and parking was seen to be acceptable by the committee, but these other issues of density and the building's height and bulk were of concern, and those were raised through the various representations which we considered.
No further discussion? No further discussion on the project? Nope. Okay. I'll put that. All those in favour of the recommendation say aye.
Aye.
Against say no.
Aye.
All those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Briscoe, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
That's accidentally counted him as a yes.
Just to clarify, Lord Mayor, I did count Alderman Zuko as voting for the motion. No? Apologies. Apologies.
It's all right, it's okay.
So, Alderman Zuko, Alderman Barakis and Alderman Thomas. That's carried, Lord Mayor, 9 votes to 3.
Joke. Moving on to item 9.3, which is 66 Burnett Street, North Hobart.
9.3, so this is under the City of Hobart Interim Planning Scheme, Lord Mayor. 66 Burnett Street extension to previously approved development, including 8 additional multiple dwellings. So moved for approval.
Seconded by Alderman Barakis.
So, Lord Mayor, as you remember, this 66 Burnett Street had quite a history, and it's taken a long time for the building to begin, to get started. And then this application for 8 additional dwellings are proposed, and this is what we're considering tonight. So there were 3 additional dwellings on level 5 of the multi-level apartment approved on the site, and there are 3 additional dwellings and on level 5 and another additional level 6 at the northwestern end of the approved building. So a total of 8 additional dwellings, 3 one-bedroom and 5 3-bedroom apartments are proposed, which brings it to a ground level height of approximately 17.75 metres. The performance standards are commercial zone building height and residential and visitor accommodation amenity, parking and access code, number of car parking spaces, which is the crux of the reason for refusal from council officers that went to committee, and the attenuation code being the development for a sensitive use in proximity to use with the potential to cause environmental harm. There were 10 representations objecting to the proposal, and so the officers had recommended it for refusal based on parking, but the committee felt that it was suitable to consider the lengths that the developer was intending to go to look at other alternative transport, so allowing for bicycle parking, considerable amounts of bicycle parking. There was a memo that was sent to all aldermen this evening in relation to a developer contribution, which I cannot move, but it may be considered suitable given that developer contributions are possible and perhaps should have been thought of earlier, but ironically the developer contribution can only be provided for parking infrastructure. So I'll leave those introductory comments for the further discussion.
Okay, further discussion? Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Just with reference to what the Deputy Lord Mayor was saying, to my understanding, the applicant has been contacted with regards to imposing the condition which requires the developer to make a financial contribution to offset the low parking numbers, and it's in the memo today. I won't read all the conditions, it will take up time, but the advice also is to, with regards to this condition, to support the reasonable needs of the use by requiring a financial contribution in lieu of parking towards the cost of parking facilities planned in Lefroy Street. And the advice is that the total costs associated with each car parking space will not exceed $30,000 per space for 13 car parking spaces. I'd just like to move that as a condition. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
So seconded, it's an additional condition as an amendment, moved by Councillor Sherlock, seconded by Councillor Fox. Further discussion?
Just as a question, so we're asking the developer to contribute up to $390,000. Is that correct? 13 times 30? Mr. Noy?
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, that would be the maximum contribution that would be sought. I think the condition spells out that it would, the construction cost, that amount, the actual amount would be based on the construction cost per car park. based on the average cost of performing all earthworks, structures, access, drainage, pavement, curbing, marking out, signage and landscaping work for each parking space, and the proportionate area required for access and manoeuvring associated with the provision of the car parking space.
So, supplementary question through you, Lord Mayor. So that potentially $390,000 would be retained by the council to provide 13 car spots somewhere else.
Noi?
Yes, Lord Mayor, the planning scheme provides the assessment of any discretion associated with car parking, and it talks about assessing the appropriateness of a financial contribution in lieu of parking towards the cost of parking facilities or other transport facilities where such facilities exist or are planned in the vicinity. Now, it's clearly it's council's intention, or has been council's intention, to provide a car parking facility at Lefroy Street, expanding that facility. So it was the officer's view that that a contribution may well be provided to the provision of that facility.
Further supplementary question through you, Lord Mayor. How far is Lefroy Street away from this development?
Noi?
Blocked in terms of blocks, probably.
In terms of access, pedestrian access to that facility, it would be in the order of 100 metres. The exact figure I'd have to... Yep.
Thank you.
And the final supplementary question, Lord Mayor, is this the first time in living memory that it's been suggested to have a parking contribution?
No.
Look, under the previous planning scheme, there was scope for contributions to be made. This would be the first that I'm aware of using these provisions under the 2015 interim planning scheme.
Thank you.
Alderman Zuko.
Yeah, I just have a couple of questions first, Lord Mayor. Has the council got a policy on contribution in lieu of parking? Through you to the appropriate officer.
No, I think it's in the planning scheme.
Only as outlined within the planning scheme under section E 6.6.1.
I'll ask a supplementary question. Under the old planning scheme, did the council have a policy on in lieu of parking?
No.
Yes, through you, Lord Mayor, there certainly was scope for the requirement for cash in lieu of parking under the old scheme.
Lord Mayor, I'll ask the questions again. I'm sorry. My questions are not about the planning scheme, because I know they're in the planning scheme. My questions were very specific. Did the council have has the council currently got a policy on in lieu of parking? And was there in the previous planning schemes, did the council have also a policy on in lieu of parking, even though it was in the planning schemes?
No, I do.
Through you, Lord Mayor, look, I don't believe there is a separate policy around cash in lieu under the currently.
Yep.
In terms of the policy position beyond the planning scheme under the previous planning scheme, I'm not sure. I don't know, have the answer.
Okay. If there's further discussion on this item, Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, I'm not familiar with this process, and I'm still not quite familiar with what's in the planning scheme with it. So I think this amendment, I don't support the amendment tonight, but what I do support is a report on understanding how we can go forward with seeking contributions in lieu of parking, and maybe that's something that is included in the parking review policy through you to the CEO. Is this something that could be included in the parking review policy, just to clarify it? Because tonight I think it is a bit, you know, I'm not comfortable with supporting the amendment because I don't know what the policy is. So I can't...
You haven't got one?
Yeah, we don't have one. So is there going to be a policy developed as part of the parking review process in 2022 on this particular topic? parking in lieu?
CEO.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you for the question, Councillor. It's certainly something that's within the scope for us to look at going forward, both in terms of how it relates to the scheme, but the local application of a policy position as part of the parking policy review.
All right. So when that comes back and we've got a strong position or an agreed policy, I'll feel more comfortable, but tonight I won't support the amendment.
I'll go Councillor Coates, I think.
Thanks. Us Bill's getting quick. Look, very quickly, I'm not in support of this amendment. Just two things broadly. I think a lot of this has been covered by the previous speakers. But look, you know, if we were to go down this path, and I think it is fraught with danger, but it needs to be consistent. It can't sort of be something that's dropped in. You know, we have a planning committee. The planning committee does its work and explores options and you know, investigates approvals and done its work and submitted a recommendation to us. And this wasn't something, if we were going down a path of asking developers to make contributions, that needs to be something that the council staff can engage and developers can engage right back at the beginning, before it even gets to planning committee. You know, I don't think it's necessarily fair that individual applicants are sort of been asked via this process to make a contribution at the final minute. I just think it's a pretty unfair process for that to occur. But secondly, I think that if we do go down this path, it does risk unintended consequences. I mean, ultimately, as a planning committee, there was a vigorous debate and we did discuss the merits or not of the parking that was being provided for this application. And look, you know, if someone was to get charged $390,000, I can promise you where it's coming out of. It's going to be coming out of the cost of those units. And it's going to be increasing and inflating the cost of those units. I mean, ultimately, the decision was made, well, the discussion was held around the planning committee that the city can bear these units, and some of these units, even without specific parking applied, can be brought to market, and the market in North Hobart can bear that. And as we all know, with forms of transport, but also the location where it's being built, you know, we think there'll be a valuable addition, or I hope there'll be a valuable addition to the city. But, you know, it does fall on, unfortunately, younger generations where they find themselves locked out of the market. And ultimately, if people are bringing stock to market that is affordable and can be accessed by them, it's a decision they can make. They can decide, look, I am going to buy this unit in the full knowledge that there isn't parking provided. And ultimately, if a developer brings that forward to us, and we look at it, discuss it, debate it, have all the facts on the table and come to a decision, I think we should abide by that. If we do want to make policy changes, it needs to be consistent to all and not sort of brought in at the last minute. So I find myself unable to support this.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I think Councillor Coates put some of the aspects I was going to debate very well, so I won't repeat those. I support him. There was a very good discussion at the planning committee. In fact, one of the most mature discussions about parking and parking in new residential developments that I have been involved in. The developer did point out there are a whole heap of smart parking options that he will bring into his development, including possibly a shared car, to be able to book a car. So you wouldn't have to have your own car, and also the idea of booking schemes for parking spaces for if you're having visitors, you could book a certain number of spaces which would be available. There is in this development some visitor accommodation, and they have parking bays there. They won't be used all the time. They also will be part of the booking scheme. So all the things that considering North Hobart on a busy Elizabeth Street with good public transport, walking within North Hobart to the restaurant strip and hopefully very flourishing businesses there, or walking down into the city, it may be that this might set a standard for parking, the availability of parking that we require. I think the planning scheme is has an emphasis on too much parking. I reckon planning scheme should reflect sufficient parking but not over parking, because really it's all concrete and if it's not being used, if to the if we went to the black letter law of how many parking spaces, it'd be a lot of concrete that wouldn't be used there. So I think the committee did ask the director to look at, could we modify the planning scheme to just have sufficient parking for these developments in this particular area, because these sorts of developments will happen in the whole precinct area in North Hobart. And the developer pointed out 1 block down, there's a requirement for no parking, so they can build residential developments with no parking. So, and this particular one is overabundance of parking is required under a planning scheme. So I think all round, this is a good development. The height is, even with an extra floor, the height is under the Woolly recommendation for the height. So the height wasn't an issue by the officers or by the, maybe one councillor mentioned height, but most of us didn't. And we had a really, as I said, a really good, excellent discussion about parking requirements for residential developments. And I think this wins all round. So, and also provides more residents for our city.
Alderman Zuko.
I have 2 questions, and then I'm going to debate, Lord Mayor, through you to the appropriate officer. Why wasn't this in the original report, or was it missed?
What in particular?
This condition in the original report.
Okay. Mr. Noy?
Through you, Lord Mayor, the officers recommended refusal, so a condition of approval was not felt relevant under those circumstances.
This condition?
Where did the condition come from?
Where did this condition come from? I'll rephrase the question.
Yeah, sorry. There was a request to establish whether there was scope to impose a condition by the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that clarifies it now. It's come from an elected member. Now it answers the questions, doesn't it? Right. I want to just remind people why you're putting up with Marty Zuko in 2021. In 1990, I put a development application in for what was Segretto, now Burger House. There was no policy on in lieu of parking at the time. The council charged one person next door $800 a car park, charged another one in lieu of parking, charged someone else $500, waived 21 car parks over here and did all this. I couldn't supply 4 car parks. I didn't have any waived and was asked to pay $20,000 or $15,000 in lieu of car parking.
Really to pay?
Yeah, that's what I was asked to pay. But none were waived in my development, but they were waived next door, 13 of them, and they paid $800. But I was being charged $15,000. This is the reason why I got on council, because council didn't have a policy on in lieu of parking at the time, because I took the council to the tribunal. I was a lawyer, our former general manager. So there was 2 planners and an engineer, and moi. And I beat the council down. Now, what we have here though is this. However, it is worth noting that a condition of this nature is untested at the tribunal. While the manager development and compliance has considered the provisions of the scheme and is satisfied that such a condition is arguable in circumstances, beautiful, love this, it is open to challenge in an appeal by the developer. If it is challenged and the challenge succeeded, the condition is likely to be severable, but would mean that development would be approved by the tribunal without condition. I hope that we don't add this in, because I could just foresee the developer deciding to challenge, and they can go back to my 1991 challenge, and there it is, the tribunal's got it there, and they can use that as a precedent in respect of the reason why council didn't have a policy at the time was the problem. So I stood on council, Lord Mayor, and one of the first things I did when I got on council is push the council to have a policy on in lieu of parking, and we implemented that policy, because once you've got a policy, it is very, very clear. This is planning on the run, This is planning interference by elected members. Because this didn't come from our planning officers. This came from an elected member seeking it to be here tonight. So I'm sorry to say that that's not the way we as a council should be operating. I actually fully believe that my counterpart in Councillor Harvey, his point is very valid. If we want to do this, and I've got no issue with having a policy on it, it needs to go through the proper processes and we have a policy implemented. This is not the way we operate. And I've got to say to you, I'd be wagering that they would win, and I reckon my case in 1991 would actually assist their case.
Alderman Baracus.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll start with the question. The advice that's in the memo does say total cost associated with each car parking space will not exceed $30,000 per space for 13 parking spaces. That calculates out to $390,000, which is the maximum I think you said could be charged through you, Chair. Why is that? Why was that not just said straight away? That the cost would be $390,000.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Look, the basis of the condition required further investigation, but we wanted to provide at least some certainty for the benefit of the applicant in relation to it. So we provided an absolute maximum figure to achieve that certainty.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, I agree with much of what's been said, to be honest. I think this is something that, as Councillor Harvey said, there should be a policy on, and as Councillor Coates said, if we do have a policy on contributions for developers for parking, it should be something that people go into eyes wide open, properly informed of what the situation is where they're entering into a development so they can make a choice. I don't think it's something we should be dumping on people at the last minute, even after the point at which they're able to respond during a planning committee. We've dumped this on 5 minutes to midnight before a decision's been made, and it's not a small amount of money. It's once again, this is a council that time and again talks about the fact that we have serious housing issues in our city, and we talk about putting on a almost $400,000 additional fee. Now, I agree with what Alderman Briscoe said. I think last week's debate around this and the issue of parking was one of the more productive conversations and debates I think we've had in the planning committee for a long time. The issue of parking, and it's one that's going to come up again tonight, is an interesting one. And one of the things that the committee, I suppose, as a majority found, or the committee discussed, was there's a difference between long-term residential parking and there's a difference between the 15-minute, half an hour, 3-hour parking that's of issue in Condell Place or on the main strip or around the corner in Lefroy Street, which came up earlier. And whether there's a lack of parking or there isn't a lack of parking in a residential development, if there is a lack of parking in that residential development, tenants aren't going to be overflowing into a 3-hour metered parking space. That's not a realistic scenario. They're not going to be overflowing into the 15-minute spots on the street. This isn't.
Ordering your groceries over
This isn't an issue where the two are going to be overflowing with each other. So the thought that we'd be demanding of a developer $400,000 to financially contribute to a short-term parking space a block and a half up the road, and we could talk about the saga of Lefroy Street. I know there's a whole story there, but that's ultimately something that's the council's responsibility. So look, I don't support the amendment. I think, as has been said, I think it's planning on the run. I think if we do want to enter into a discussion around some sensible policies about this, because I think, especially for commercial applications, this will be something that comes up and rears its head again. And I think it's important that we do have a policy on that, and we have that discussion in a responsible and intelligent manner. That isn't 5 minutes before a development application for a residential building. As was debated during that meeting, I think Councillor Harvey and I agreed wholeheartedly that the location, the positioning of this development is one that lends itself very well to alternative forms of transport. It's located on a main road that is very near services and has buses that go past, I think, every 3 or 4 minutes. There's huge options for car sharing, huge options for pedestrian or an active transport into the city, as it's only literally up the road. And I think this is one of those cases where the same apartment building located further away from the city, we'd be having a very different conversation, as the parking might be, the lack of parking would be a very, very relevant discussion. But I think this is one of those times where it's appropriate to exercise discretion, because the parking situation, as has been said, a block down the road they wouldn't ever have a requirement for parking at all, because the proximity to services, the proximity to public transport and the proximity to the city itself mean that, in today's day and age, there will be a large number of people that would have a demand for residential accommodation that doesn't need parking space. And I think this development has the ability to accommodate that, and I don't think that the parking arrangements in this building will have any impact on the parking demands and the parking situation that we're seeing up the road in North Hobart, as it's a completely different demand for parking. So look, I don't support. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I don't support the amendment. I think, as has been said, I think it is planning on the run. I think we should be having a much more intelligent discussion about this matter, and I would be urging everybody to support the development itself.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah,
Sorry. Deputy, did you want to sum up?
No, I had a couple of questions, if I may.
Okay, a couple of questions.
Councillor Sherlock speaks. Just three questions, I think, maybe two, but could you just describe, through you to the Director, how much this discretion of parking will save the applicant, through you to the to the Director, not the developer?
No.
Yes, Lord Mayor. Look, back in 2012, we estimated that a cost of a multi-storey car parking provision would be, just for the construction, not for the land, around $30,000 to construct. For the provision of a multi-storey.
So just subsequent question to that. So the number of car parks that won't be provided, that should be provided?
Lord Mayor, over the extent of the complete development is 80 car parking spaces in total. This application before Council tonight is only for additional 8 dwellings, and the deficiency in car parking attributed to the scheme, under the scheme, is 13 spaces.
Thank you. And just a follow-up query to Councillor Coates when he suggested consistency. A couple of doors down, there's the Baracus development. And through you to the Director, did we require parking spaces for that proposal? And there is parking spaces required provided in that development?
Lord Mayor, there was a deficiency in the number of car parking spaces, but it wasn't to the same extent as this proposal. It was closer to the scheme requirements, and the officers were comfortable that it represented a reasonable provision based on expected demand.
Thanks.
Councillor Sherlock.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I'm a really big believer in getting more information that may help you to change your mind or make a more informed decision. And I think the really key points for me, regardless of the fact that this is actually contained in the Act and we're able to do it in the Act, Everybody seems concerned about a lack of policy around this particular issue. So, and to quote Alderman Zuko, once we've got a policy, things are much clearer. So we should really have a sensible policy, and policy is so important. So policy is really important. So I think I'll withdraw this amendment if that's possible, because from what I've heard, it's probably not going to get up anyway. And if
the seconder has to agree.
Who was the second? That was me.
Okay.
What should you think?
Councillor
I
Fox.
reckon we can do that.
Okay, so that's been withdrawn. Okay, any further discussion on the item? Councillor Dutta.
Just a few questions. Question one through you, Chair. What is the total deficiency in this particular building for car spaces?
Yeah,
I wasn't too sure. Was it 80 or?
80, yeah, I wanted clarification on that.
I just want clarification. The total deficiency for this whole building.
Yes, Lord Mayor, that's correct. You heard it correctly. It is 80 spaces in total.
But for this particular development, it's only 13.
That's correct.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. So just again, to get a clarification, for this whole development, it's 80 plus. Is that correct?
Yes, I think Mr. Noy is nodding. 80.
Lord Mayor, that's correct.
Lord Mayor, we're not approving the whole. As a question, are we approving the whole development, or are we approving this smaller development?
Councillor Dutta's question was about the whole development.
Yeah, but I'm just making sure that the development has been approved. We just. Yep.
Okay, Councillor Dutta.
We're not going back over old ground.
Thank you, Alderman Briscoe.
Thank you.
I appreciate your comment, but I am entitled to ask for clarification, and I was seeking clarification because I was limited in the knowledge.
You might want to concentrate on your phone instead.
Stop shopping and concentrate on the meeting.
No, it just goes on.
Okay, Councillor Dutta, please.
My other question is this, that I want to understand what is the role of the development engineer and the role of the traffic engineer, and if they refused it, and what was the grounds for refusal?
Mr. Noy.
The role of the traffic engineer is to evaluate the traffic movements within the public road system and access to it. And also to consider any impact of deficiency of car parking on the public system. The role of the development engineer is to consider the movement of vehicles within the site itself and the appropriateness of the car parking provision generally. Now, in relation to the grounds for refusal, they were based on, in the officer's view, that the deficiency of car parking was so deficient that they would not meet the relevant performance criteria, particularly under clause E6.6.1. Chair.
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Now, I'm just again asking for a clarification. Are we going to firstly vote for the amendment and then is withdrawn? Okay. Thank you. So let me say this. It is my understanding that I hear in this council constantly that we should listen to the experts. And here are the experts who have made their recommendation to us that under the clause 661, it does not fulfill the provisions very clearly. Secondly, the point I want to make here is that if we have this recommendation given to us that it is under this provision, it's not fulfilling the requirements. My point with regards to North Hobart is this: we have so clearly in the recent weeks and months have the problem of parking so loudly and clearly communicated to us. Now, when I look at the report, the facts are very clear. it's not what the developer is proposing for parking. He's going to do this or they are going to do that. That is not based on the proposed plan for parking. My decision here today is based on the planning scheme, on the performance criteria. And under that particular clause 661, it does not meet the criteria. So therefore I cannot support this. Thank you.
Alderman Barakis.
Point of clarification, Lord Mayor. Might remind the council that on the topic of expert advice, Councillor Dutta did just vote in the previous item against the expert advice to approve a development. So it can't be, you know, good for us and not good for them. So I'll just put that forward.
Maybe a number of other developments.
Okay, that wasn't really a point of clarification, Alderman Barakis. That's a comment, but yeah, or Councillor Harvey.
Lord Mayor, as I see it, Council is trying to encourage people to use other forms of mobility. And in the future, we will have more people scooting around.
Have you spoken, Councillor?
No,
Oh, you spoke on the
amendment.
Okay.
So Council, I think, has a desire to get people out of their cars, to be more involved in active transport, that's walking, riding scooters, riding bikes. And I know there's always pushback against that, but it's a trend that's occurring all over the world. All cities are looking at how they can encourage people to use alternative forms of transport, alternative forms of mobility to the car. So having car park requirements needs to be considered really thoroughly by Council, and I agree with looking at a policy of how we offset car parking in lieu, so we can create other facilities that help people get around. But the trend also in other cities is for car sharing, and I know in Melbourne, for example, there's at least 5 car sharing companies that provide an option, and you can go up and scan your phone or scan your card or whatever it is on the window, get access to the car. These things will happen in Hobart at some point in time. The proponent of this development also mentioned those sort of things, and he's also mentioned that he does have car share in other projects as well. So these options will become more and more more and more mainstream as we move forward with regard to mobility. And Council wants that. Every council in the world, I imagine, wants to get people out of cars and resolve their parking issues by people using other forms of mobility. And when it comes to parking, parking is not an issue. It's the number of cars that's the issue. There's just too many cars to be accommodated. So the more people we can encourage to walk the last K, to not use their car for short distance, I think the better. And I think we also have some preliminary data on the number of people who drive short distances. I'm not sure if this data is locked in yet, but there's a high percentage of people who live in North Hobart that drive their car from North Hobart to North Hobart, that they don't walk that last kilometre. And imagine if people did start to do that, suddenly we wouldn't have people circling looking for car parking. We'd have a much freer and easier to navigate system. So I'm hoping that in the future, more and more people turn to other forms of mobility, and by loosening our requirements or lessening our requirements on parking in developments, that hopefully will be seen as an incentive for people to not own cars and to use other options. So I'm comfortable with tonight's recommendation for approval, and I don't mind there being a shortage of parking in this development because, as has been said, it's close to public transport. Within metres away there is public transport, and I think this is one of the rapid bus areas where there's a bus every 10 minutes. Also, as has been mentioned, there's another development just down the road which had no parking requirement for a number of units. Great development, one of my favourite developments in Hobart, but there's no requirement for parking. So I'm very comfortable with the recommendation tonight.
Any further discussion? Deputy Lord Mayor, would you like to sum up at all?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I think it's been an interesting discussion for a number of reasons, and maybe you know, looking at the way that we do parking, maybe not having a minimum requirement for parking, may be something that we consider in the future. So I look forward to that discussion. I suppose the point about the developer contribution, having the ability to ride is good, but having the bike infrastructure upon which to ride is also another thing. So if we're looking at developing that developer contribution policy, or expanding that so that we can be ready to talk with developers in relation to that, then we need to be considering things like bike infrastructure and pedestrian-friendly infrastructure to make sure that we do have a fit and healthy community. So, again, I think it's been a very good discussion in relation to this. Thank you.
Okay, I'll put that. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously.
No.
Oh, sorry. Against, show of hands. All those in favour?
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe, the Deputy Lord Mayor.
Sorry. Yeah. And,
Sorry.
against?
Councillor Dutta. That's
Okay.
carried, Lord Mayor, 11 votes to 1.
Item 9.4, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Thank you. This is 51 Bay Road, Newtown, 2 multiple dwellings, 1 existing, 1 new.
Seconded by Alderman Briscoe.
So 2-storey, 3-bedroom contemporary dwelling is proposed behind another development on Bay Road. The other thing that...
9.5. This is 9.4.
Pretty straightforward development proposal of infill behind, the second dwelling behind an existing dwelling. The concerns from the neighbouring apartments were overshadowed in relation to their living space, but it was demonstrated that there wouldn't be such an impact that the representative was particularly concerned about.
Okay, any discussion? I'll put that. All those in favour say aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
An interest, Lord Mayor.
9.5, Alderman Zuko has declared an interest. We'll just wait for him to leave. And Deputy Lord Mayor, if you'd like to move this.
Yes, move for approval for partial change of use of food services at 315 Elizabeth Street, North Hobart.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
So, Lord Mayor, this is effectively the beer garden of Boodle Beasley, and so we had a 12-month trial, effectively a 12-month trial over a COVID time. So it's probably not the most accurate of trials, if you like, but essentially Boodle Beasley wants to continue using their outdoor space. There were concerns, and particularly having rear garden use between 8 and 6 Monday to Sunday, and then, sorry, that was the temporary use, but the proposal 6 to permanently use the rear garden.
Okay.
Proposal 6 to permanently use the rear garden area between 8 a.m. during 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. during daylight savings, 7 days a week, and otherwise 8 to 6 p.m. 7 days a week. The recommendation from the council officers was, because it wasn't discretionary, it's a split area. One part of the beer garden is residential, the other is commercial. So, in essence, it couldn't really be approved by the officers, and some of us believe that should stay because of the impact on residential amenity. However, this is recommended by the committee for approval.
Okay, further discussion? Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think this is one of those times where it's right for us to exercise our discretion. I think the Boodle Beasley Bar, I think, is one that's generally very positively received, and I think they in my experience, have gone out of their way to ensure that what they're doing is fit and proper, and they provide a good venue, but they also do their best to ensure that they're having as minimal impact on neighbouring properties as they can. I know there was, put forward during the committee by representatives that there was some instances where patrons had done the wrong thing. I think there was some situations where things have been thrown over the fence and the like. And that's why there was that extra condition that was added to require that a full-time staff member was in the area while the area was under use, to ensure that there was as enforcement of good behaviour and enforcement of all the things that the applicants have agreed to in the conditions of the application itself. And they were, to their credit, happily willing to agree to that. And so I think this is a positive step forward, and I think it's a bit of certainty for them, and I think it's a great little venue, and one that I'd encourage everybody to support.
No further discussion. I'll put that.
I have a few questions, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Dutton.
When the trial period was permitted by the council, it is my understanding that there were conditions with regards to the management plan. And the question that I have here is this. With regards to the management plan, there were two elements to it. It should have been approved by the council, and secondly, provided to the adjoining property owners. Now, I'm just wondering if that was done. Was it provided to them or not?
No.
Lord Mayor, look, the owner assures us that he personally handed it to immediate neighbours. So yes, it was done. And sorry, Lord Mayor, and it was approved by myself as provided for in the condition.
Thank you. The other question that I have is why was it necessary to seek legal advice on this matter?
No.
Lord Mayor, it was an extension of a prohibited use within the residential zone. So officers wanted to be assured that there was scope under the scheme in which to do that.
A follow-up question, Lord Mayor. So what was the recommendation of the legal advice?
No.
Look, Lord Mayor, look, I'd have to remind myself of that legal advice, so I'd have to take that on notice. But so, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have that answer before me at this point in time.
Discussion.
Just one final question, Lord Mayor. I just want to know the difference when the staff, in their recommendations, say it must be refused, or when they say it is recommended to be refused.
No.
Lord Mayor, well, a recommendation is a recommendation. It would be up to the decision maker, in this case council, to make the determination. Where we would use the word must, it is our strong advice that council should refuse the proposal based on qualified advice.
Councillor Dutton.
Thank you very much for the answers. Now, in this recommendation again, the staff, I understand, have refused or recommended refusal. It wasn't a recommendation, but it states very clearly it must be refused. Now, these are very strong terms, as we have heard, when why this is said to us. And it is based on, again, on clause 9.111, where it very clearly states that there shouldn't be any detrimental impact on the neighbours, 2, in their locality, and 3, that there'll be no intensification of the noise. And on all those elements, it fails. according to the report and the evidence provided to us by the staff. Therefore, I will have difficulty voting for this. Thank you.
Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, I think whilst we did share a time at uni in the same law school, I think the law that Councillor Dutta is describing is not as clear cut as he makes out to be. In my view, that we all have a discretion to approve this. It's within our rights. In fact, I'll ask the question to the Director, and I'm sorry we're using, he's the only Director that we seem to ask regular questions, but I'll ask the question, have we the right under law to approve this development application?
No.
Lord Mayor, Council does have the right.
Thank you.
Exercise of discretion.
And it's a right that we take advice from legal people, we take advice from our council officers, but we have now got confirmed that we have the right to approve this. Now, we had quite a big discussion at the planning meeting. We learned that only one complaint had been made in the year, and there were disputed facts. It could be in the sound from the venue rather than the beer garden that was causing a complaint. One neighbour has indicated that the management plan over that year has worked and was very satisfied, an elderly neighbour who thought the management plan had worked, and we had another neighbour who didn't think it worked. But again, I think as we have the right, and I know it's called black letter law, that perhaps Councillor Dutta is referring to, I think we've got the right to override any advice or take advice ourselves and listen to the evidence, and the evidence suggests this is a good use of this area in our vibrant, hopefully continually vibrant North Hobart area.
Okay, there's no further discussion. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Aye. Show of hands, all those in favour.
Alderman Sexton, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Sherlock, Councillor Coates, Councillor Fox, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe and the Lord Mayor.
Against?
Councillor Dutta and Deputy Lord Mayor. That's carried, Lord Mayor. 9 votes to 2. Sorry.
Okay, item 9.6 is 327.
Alderman,
oh, yeah.
Go back.
Pick up the meeting over in a few minutes. You don't need your phones up. We need him off. Would you believe I was trying to turn it off both times?
Not only should you have your volume down, you should be shopping locally anyway. I heard your Woolworths ads.
I was trying to turn the silly thing off.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is the former Wagon and Horses site, 327 Argyle Street, North Hobart. Partial demolition, alterations and extension.
Seconded by Councillor Harvey.
So this is really changing a sports bar to more of a family bistro. So the front bar and TV room of the existing site will become a dining and function room with a smaller lounge bar in the previous dining section of the building. So there'll be internal alterations to provide new toilet amenities, upgraded facilities and compliant access throughout. The upstairs part of the building, which was used as accommodation of sorts, is not part of this. There's no change, and that's essentially vacant upstairs as part of this. So there were a number of representations in relation to this, concerned residents mainly on George Street, who and Argyle Street, to be fair, who were concerned about the parking, the movement, the hours, access to their driveways and so forth. So again, we had the applicant and their planner at the committee meeting, and I think it was quite clear that those concerns really needed to be taken on, and so those this application recommendation for approval is conditioned accordingly.
Further discussion? That all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against say no. Carried unanimously. Moving on now to item 10, Alderman Zuko.
I'll move the item, Lord Mayor.
Seconded by Alderman Briscoe.
Yes, tonight's been a very interesting night on parking, hasn't it? We've had a number of questions asked in regards to this. It's similar to North Hobart. This is not something that it's a Marty Zuko idea. It's something that's been lobbied very heavily to this council over the past number of months by a number of business people in Hobart. But I'll start by saying this. If you walk into a restaurant and you order a rare steak and get delivered a well-done steak, or you order a vegetarian pasta and get a creamy chicken pasta, one of the things we do in hospitality is we look at the situation very, very quickly and resolve it very, very quickly. Unfortunately, I've got to say this council over a period of time has lost its customer service focus, and that's what I am going to actually debate more rather than what's here. Because for years, the city of Hobart, it's been the heart of our city. Salamanca has been a conduit to our city. All our little suburbs around the city of Hobart have been the arterial aspects to keep our city beating. One only has to walk over to, or drive, so walk, you can't walk, but drive over to Eastlands, and within 10 minutes we've got 3 municipalities. You can actually go shopping at Eastlands and have 4 hours of free parking. And I'll go back to the customer service aspect of what I want to talk about, is that we shouldn't just worry about our own ratepayers. We as a city, as the capital city, need to encourage people to come and shop in our city and be part of our city to help our business people, which in turn helps the rate base overall. So our customers are not only our ratepayers, our customers are actually people outside of our city. Because in any shopping centre, in any shopping complex, and we always want to compare Melbourne, Sydney or otherwise, we look at shopping complexes compete against each other. We are in competition with Eastlands, we're in competition with Kingston and all the others. Because I've had so many people contact me in regards to the parking issue, and the other day I went to a very well-known little cafe in the centre, right in the smack centre of the city of Hobart, very well known, in Liverpool Street, and the owner spoke to me about the car parking in Liverpool Street, how it's completely different to the car parking all around the place, and showed me a photo of one of the clients getting booked at 7:15 while having dinner. What can I say? What can you say? I'm not here advocating that we immediately scrap everything. I'm here asking, and mind you, from the petition of 3,700 people, from the questions that have been asked a number of times by people, I'm asking that the council re-evaluate the on-street parking, just a re-evaluation, doesn't say any action, just a re-evaluation, and that the CEO provide a report once point 2 happens in respect of giving the CEO the delegated authority to consult businesses and traders and get their imprimatur, get their viewpoints. So it's not a number of people coming up to me or Alderman Briscoe or anybody else. The CEO, in which we should have some faith in, can go out. And I understand that there's a report coming in 2022, but we can't wait for this for 2022. This is something I believe like the CEO has demonstrated in North Hobart, she can get onto things very, very quickly, and that assists this council in providing it a more customer service orientated council, and come back with a report as part of that evaluation. Point 3, you see, I understand we've gone down and embarked on bring your bike and get a free coffee. Look, I've been in retail. I've been in just about every business you can think of. May I have an extra 2 minutes, Lord Mayor? This is very important.
Seconded by Councillor Alderman Barakis. All those in favour say aye.
Aye. 1 minute. 2, I said. Yeah. Lord Mayor.
Against say no. All those in favour.
Lord Mayor, I just spent the last 6 years. Reshaping the Australian Italian Club. The primary focus there, Lord Mayor, was customer service, and changed the whole mentality of the whole nature of it. From being near insolvent 6 years ago, 2 weeks ago at the AGM, I delivered $110,000 in the bank of the Australian Italian Club and revamped it. The shop and save at Victoria Gardens, I've actually mentioned it quite a number of times, is if you want to get people to come and shop, you've got to actually have a winner out of it. If you're going to say to people, come to the city and we're going to just give you free parking, who wins? The person that's taking the free parking. But if you say to the person, come to the city, shop, and if you spend over X amount of dollars, you will get a bonus. You will get discounted parking or free parking. Victoria Gardens in Melbourne does it very, very well, because you go there, to get any discount on parking, you must shop and spend over $20. That's the types of incentives we need to bring in here. And Lord Mayor, you can actually implement that with your bike as well. Bring your bike in, hang it up in the car park, and shop a docket. I know you don't pay for parking, but you can get something else. We can implement something else there, Lord Mayor. And if you remember, Lord Mayor, I was the one that actually pushed the bike parking in Argyle car park. And also, Lord Mayor, you know, we a little while ago, which was quite interesting, we were talking about parking in lieu. Point 2 actually assists that if we decide to go down parking in lieu, where if we have car parking and car parking revenue should be re-spent into car parking. I ask each and every elected member to consider this council as a customer service focused organisation.
Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. For the first 4 or 5 hours today, I thought that I tried to read too much into this, and I actually was going to get up and probably argue against it. But I think given the number of, having spoken with the mover of the motion prior to the meeting and hearing that astounding, almost 4,000 number of petition, we only had 16,000 for the cable car. It's a huge number when you think of the number of businesses that must be represented in terms of that petition. But look, I think it's reflective because of that petition, and on the grounds of communication and responsiveness alone, this is a good move, and as has been clearly stated, the CEO has a reputation coming from the North Hobart exercise recently that will be taken well on board in terms of any media publication following this meeting. But clearly also, there's a diverse number of reasons why a business might have a trading decline. And obviously that's competitiveness, customer service, product inventory, and marketing, etc. And this issue of parking might in some cases be seen as just the one that they decided to ping for their particular downfall. I mean, we're still in a state of a pandemic. We have no trade from Victoria. We have no trade from New South Wales, and there's only a few brave ones of us amongst them. I'm looking at one who would be prepared to travel to Queensland in case Anastasia decides to kill a return trip. So at the moment, it's really difficult to be able to ping our little parking meters as being the cause of this. But it is within our power as a council to respond, as I believe this motion does, have the CEO look at it objectively, and ensure that when the report comes back, if we can, if the mover of the motion doesn't have any objection, that the CEO does some form of assessment by whatever criteria can be created just to break down whether or not the meters are indeed the issue. And if indeed it comes back to council and we've done our job, the job's been done, and there is a resounding yes that the parking meters have caused, or the charge increases have caused the problem, then it should obviously go to Finance Committee to have a look at the impact on the budget. But in this event, and given what we've heard tonight already, and given that it is simply an assessment of the truth or not of where this issue has arisen in terms of a potential loss of trade, I'll support the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I think what Alderman Zuko and Alderman Thomas has said is spot on. I think our new CEO, and relatively new CEO, has already built up a reputation to have a fair and impartial listen to traders and other people. And the positive feedback I'm getting is that they like that approach. So the idea that part 2 of Alderman Zuko's motion is good, that the CEO have that fresh look at it. I think there is a growing perception which does reflect into actual movements of people into the city, that you don't go to the city because their parking is terrible. And you have incidents, which I won't reveal what the incident I shared with the CEO on last week, where it was just dreadful. It was dreadful, and it was said that it was the policy of the Hobart City Council. So that gets around the community pretty well. A perception that you don't shop in the city anymore because parking is terrible. And you go to Eastlands, it's chock-a-block full of people. You go to Northgate, it's chock-a-block full. I haven't been down at Kingston, but presumably the shopping centres down there are pretty full as well. You go around the city and you see a lot of fairly cheap student-type eating houses and probably a few coffee shops, but you don't get the feeling that it is a vibrant place, and it's changed. It's changed since it's only the last few years. It's changed. The feeling of walking around the city now, it's not a shopping place. It's noodle bars or things like that. It's actually changed its perception, and I think we've got to turn that around. Parking meters are certainly, the parking meters are still dreadful. You see people leaning over, trying to understand the parking meter technology. The technology is probably good, but I think it's probably we're putting too much emphasis on computers to do our things where we could have very simple things, you know. Yeah. And I think we learnt tonight about the variety of charges around the city. Let's have a one charge. I've got a parking meter outside my house. I don't know how much that is an hour. It's a $3 one. Is it a $5 one? I don't know. And I think we should, if you park in the city, it probably should be fairly standard. And even walking up Elizabeth Street, you see 15-minute zone, an hour, another 15, 30 minutes, next one, and so on. In front of my place, it's 2 hours, and that's just the end, towards the end of Liverpool Street there. So there are so many different parking regimes in just one street, and it's very confusing because there's also drop-off zones for businesses. So all I can say is that anyone who comes into our city thinks, oh, it's easier to go to Eastlands. It's easier to go to Glenorchy. If we were one council area, Glenorchy, Hobart and Clarence, which I will be advocating in the next few weeks, I think we could get some sensible thing that, yes, all right, perhaps the shopping zone should be Glenorchy and Hobart, but would be one Hobart then, rather than 3 competing municipalities. I support this. I support it because it shows that council is listening and especially since that petition has arrived tonight, 3,000 odd signatures. I think Alderman Zuko is right about once you felt like you could make not instant decisions, but relatively quick decisions about the future, and it could be implemented tomorrow morning. But now we've got this, it appears like we've turned into a Titanic. We're zooming along, but we cannot change our course, even we know there's icebergs in front of us. So I like the perception is that we are pretty responsive, we respond quickly, and I think Alderman Zuko has got it really nailed down by saying, let's have a customer service approach. That's all I need to say.
Councillor Harvey, I think, was up first.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. So tonight we had a whole series of questions on parking, and I was really impressed with the detail in the answers to those questions. We saw a petition come in with 3,784 signatures, and I guess that's a bit awkward because who doesn't want to get rid of parking? So if I was asked, if I went to another city and they asked me, do you want to get rid of parking or do you want to pay less for parking? Well, I think it's a bit of a Dorothy Dixon, push-pull sort of thing. So, but anyway, we've got a petition that we need to respond to and take it seriously. As I said, the questions we've already had, and just a question through you, Lord Mayor. So, when exactly will the parking policy be developed or reviewed? Is it a development or is it a review of what we currently have? Through you, Lord Mayor, to the CEO.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I will stand corrected with Director Carr, but my understanding is it's actually a review of a policy position to take into account all of the precincts across the city, and that will be undertaken and, as Lord Mayor outlined earlier, drafted for consultation early in 2022.
Okay. Now, is that a standard process through you, Lord Mayor? Do we do this every year, or has it been delayed by a number of years because of COVID? So it's just on schedule. Is it, the usual process?
Mr. Noy.
Yeah, through you, Lord Mayor. There's no doubt there's some delay due to staffing matters, but we would hope, we understand the urgency of this policy review, not only for the Central Hobart Precincts Plan, but subsequent precincts plans at North Hobart. So we are keen to, a brief has been drafted already, so we're keen to progress it as soon as we can.
All right, and it's now the 11th of October, so this will be coming to us in early 2022?
Yes, certainly early as possible.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, listening to the debate so far, Alderman Zuko, going well, but I was talked out of this motion by my colleagues across the table here because they brought something into the debate which I think we've got to be really careful of, and that's doing stuff because we feel like it rather than doing stuff because of the data.
Point of order. He's just got stuck into my character by saying I do it because of the feeling. I think that's wrong. If it was on the argument,
I don't think it's a point of order.
No, it is a point of order.
It's not a point of order.
Well, you don't think it is. I think it is a point of order, and I think I should ask him to withdraw it.
It's an opinion.
It's an opinion because he's on the right side. He actually gives the opinion.
Alderman Briscoe, my determination is that it's not
fair.
fair.
That I don't think it's right.
And Lord Mayor, it is an opinion about an opinion. And what I'm interested in is the data. And I think we have to be informed by evidence and by the facts as delivered to us by City Innovation through the data available through the meters, or not the meters, sorry, the sensors in the street. That's been a great success for Hobart to have those sensors. Put in as many parking spots as we have done. How many sensors are there? Can I just ask through you, Lord Mayor? How many sensors in Hobart do we have now?
Through you, Lord Mayor, it's around 4,000 to 5,000.
And do they provide 24/7 data to the council?
Yes, they do.
And do we use that as a reason, or the information from, or the data from those sensors, does that inform our parking policy?
Through you, Lord Mayor, yes it does.
And we also had a comment that we should have a standard parking fee across the whole city.
No, I didn't.
You did say that. You did.
I said that we should look at those sorts of things.
It was suggested we have a standard set parking fee across the city. That would be a disaster. So we have 15-minute, 30-minute, 1 hour, 2 hour, and then further out we have 3-hour parking time limits. And that's a parking strategy. And we've got to maintain a good parking strategy.
30 seconds.
And I agree it does need a review. So I'd like to roll all these things into the same review for next year, but I'm really cautious about what has been said about we should just do stuff. We could make a decision overnight to change things. And I just find that to be really awkward, and I don't want that.
Lord Mayor, I take the previous opinion, but that's objectively misrepresenting the intent of this motion. The intent of this motion is reports, it's re-evaluation, it's not jumping to a policy.
I'm sorry, these are not points of order. This is debate, and this is
What
misrepresentation.
I'm not misrepresenting Alderman Briscoe because he said something along those lines. So unfortunately tonight, I'm going to go with the review that's coming up in the new year.
Alderman, Councillor Harvey.
I have a question, Lord Mayor, if you wouldn't mind.
No, I think there's some other people who'd like to
Well, a question anyway, whenever you're ready.
Councillor Coates.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Look, I'll try and keep my contribution brief, and I hear that you were convinced by that side of the table, then unconvinced by that side of the table. Maybe this side of the table can be the swing vote in the middle.
Pointing into the table.
Pointing it, well, yeah. Look, I'm a representative of the community into this council, sitting here with all of you with oversight over our offices. I also spend a lot of the time being a representative of this council out in the community, and I spend a lot of the time explaining decisions that were made and why. And look, not everyone is happy with every decision, and often you get ones where you're not going to make everyone happy, and we know that, and you have to sort of take the community along with you. But what I do find is I spend a lot of my time out in the community defending the council, and rightly so, because we have officers here that work for us, that we have governance and oversight of, our CEO, our directors, our general staff, who are brilliant at that job. And a lot of the work that they do doesn't necessarily get the front page of the Mercury, but it does make a difference to people's lives. And so, you know, it's a funny hat we wear. In one element, we're the board, the governance. In one element, we're the voice of council out in the community, defending council often, explaining our decisions, but we're also the voice of the community back in here. And I think that's what I want to speak mostly on today, because ultimately the reason I spend so much time defending council and explaining decisions is because, like it or not, we have good people and they do good work. And I think this motion empowers them to continue doing good things and good work. This talks about, it doesn't talk about directing what they have to do and what the outcome will be. This talks about empowering ultimately the officers that we trust, that we have oversight of, to do good things, gives them the authority to go and consult with businesses. Says, look, you do need to do a re-evaluation, a reassessment of parking. And you know, I asked myself, why has this come about? And I listened to the mover provide the reasons. And look, it is, in my view, eminently sensible. Like it or not, the elephant in the room is that there are stresses, and some of it's caused by no one's fault. It's COVID, it's changing circumstances, but there are clearly stresses. There are businesses struggling, there are people's lives affected, there are 3,700 odd who've even gone to the effort of signing a petition. They feel that strongly about it. And I can't speak for the other 11 members, but when I go around the community, and the voice that I hear is that this is a pain point right now. And this is something that, you know, if it's not already the number 1, 2 and 3 items that take up the focus of our staff and our general manager and our CEO, then it should be in the number 1, 2 or 3 spot. And so I think this motion helps that. It's us ultimately taking that governance role and saying, look, we are representatives of the community, and at the moment the community is hurting. And they feel, and it might be a perceived, but they feel that we're not perhaps being as sharp as we could be in this area. This isn't trying to come up with all the solutions at once. This isn't trying to come up with, get the answers before you ask questions. To me, as I read this motion, what I'm being asked to vote on today, is eminently sensible. I can see the provenance of where it's come from, and it matches with the experience that I've had out in the community and the experience that 3,700 other odd people clearly have as well. But ultimately, the reason I'm comfortable voting for this is the reason I'm comfortable working with and defending the actions and often the work that our council staff and officers do. Because, you know, a lot of it goes unnoticed and unheralded, but they do good work and they get great outcomes. And I think that asking them to go and do a quick revaluation, to give them the authority to go and talk to traders, they will do good work and they will get good outcomes. And it's up to us ultimately to hopefully pass this motion, which sends a clear message that as representatives of the community, this is a pain point right now. It's something that clearly segments of the community are wanting. We've had a petition tonight as well. And yes, we need to make sure it is in one of those top 3 spots. But I'm comfortable voting for this because I know where it's come from, I can see what its intent is, but ultimately I'm comfortable in doing this because I trust in our CEO, I trust in our directors and I trust in our staff, and you know, they're gonna take this and it's just gonna add to their drawstring of arrows and give them an extra oomph, and I think it's eminently sensible. So I'd urge you to reconsider and support this motion.
Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
I have a few questions, Lord Mayor. The first question is, with regards to the decision that was made for the parking meter and the $5 increase, what was the rationale behind that? And was there a workshop on this? Did it go to the Finance Committee? Did it come to the Council?
And I voted for it, just so everybody knows.
Mr.
Thank you.
Through you, Lord Mayor, the process, it's an annual process of setting fees and charges for the parking. So we do a citywide, precinct by precinct, block by block, street by street, bay by bay analysis based on usage, demand, and then that's all sort of wrapped up into proposed pricing and strategies for the year ahead. We did have a couple of workshops on it last year.
Councillor Dutta.
The second question is, how many total parking meters are in operation in the CBD, and how many bays are completely free?
Mr. Carr.
Lord Mayor, there's roughly around 400 parking metres. There's around 2,500 on-street parking bays with sensors. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid. There's around 400 that are free around the city.
Thank you. The other question that I have is, how much worth in dollar terms in free parking vouchers are given to pensioners per year? Thank you.
Lord Mayor, through you, we have a pensioner voucher scheme which has a value, if fully subscribed, that's about 1.3 million per year.
Thank you very much. And the final question I have, Lord Mayor, through you. This motion talks about shop and save. Is there a similar program that we have here in Hobart?
Lord Mayor, not yet, but we are working on a digital voucher system through the app for parking.
Thank you.
Okay, further discussion?
Alderman Zico had a question.
Alderman Zico, your question.
Yes, Lord Mayor, I'll have an extra question now. The pensioner voucher parking system, is that on-street parking or is that in our car parks?
Lord Mayor, that's in the off-street car parks.
In the car parks, not the off-street parking?
On-street.
Off-street parking.
Off-street, okay. Okay. And the other question is in regards to, could someone please advise me why the original meters were installed in the City of Hobart in the first instance?
Revenue raising, possibly?
Anyone want to answer that question?
I can answer it, Lord Mayor, but
No, I
just,
don't.
no, officer.
In the 1960 meetings.
Any
So no one can answer that question?
Mr. Carr?
Lord Mayor, through you, I'm racking my brain. It's in the 2013 parking policy. It makes a reference to the parking meters that were put in place in the late 1950s, I believe it was, and I think it was around, it was partly around traffic control, and it was partly around income in support of building more car parks for the city.
Traffic control and income. Yeah.
Deputy Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, thank you. It's been an interesting discussion so far, and unfortunately the pointy end of the table hasn't convinced me. Councillor Coates did talk about well, that end, whatever that end might be. Councillor Coates talked about governance, and unfortunately I think this fails on both governance and financial reasons. So our role is compromised. I'd also like to just remind Council of the resolution from the 23rd of August, which says the CEO be delegated the authority to develop a local economic package to support business who continue to be impacted by border closures. Part 2 is the local economic package include but not be limited to the following components, and component G, part G, is review parking arrangements across the city to support business affected by border restrictions. I think it is in hand. We have notices of motion that come up to us occasionally that actually kind of repeat what's already in train. So I can't support the motion that is. I think we have it in the CEO's hands, and that's where we should continue to allow this to occur.
Alderman Sexton.
Look, I will say, I wasn't going to say anything, but I'll just make a comment. I agree that we, from time to time, we do move motions that are passed that suggest a certain action, and obviously the Deputy Lord Mayor has raised one that includes this type of evaluation from August, but what I'm not sure about is her second half of the comment, and that is that it is in hand. Now, maybe it's going to be done as part of the 2022 review, and I accept that, but I think what we've heard tonight from a number of different people is that 2022 is too late. There is a lot going on at the moment, and sometimes perception is actually extremely important in customer service. It's not always just delivering an outcome. It is also, it can often be the perception that we are listening and that we are responding. And even if we go out there and say to them, look, we are re-evaluating the street parking meters. I, as the CEO, am going to consult with businesses and owners and traders, and that's fed back and ultimately feeds into the 2022 review, or hopefully does something sooner than that, then that's important. It's important right now that people understand that we are listening now, that we aren't just simply saying, yeah, we've got it all in hand, you know, nothing to see here. We don't want people to believe that. We want people to believe that we are responsive to them, as has been pointed out around the table by a number of different people, at the time that it is important to them, not 6 months or a year later. And so I don't see any harm in this. It may well be that some of these things have already been suggested, and I certainly know that Alderman Zuko has talked at length about the Victoria Gardens model on a number of occasions, and I don't know, and I'm sure some people thought that was a good idea, and I don't see any evidence that we've pursued it so far. So I think, for the reasons that I specified and that others have suggested, that we should go ahead with this tonight. It will send a message, a clear message to the people that are concerned, that we're not just saying, as I said earlier, nothing to see here, it's all under control, wait until 2022 and then you'll see what we're doing. Give them the impression we're doing something now and that we are taking their concerns seriously now. And it may well be some time before we can implement everything, and I accept that, but don't just fob them off, which is what will kick the can down the road, which is what people seem to be, the term people are commonly using these days, and saying, yeah, we'll get to it, because that's not going to do it, that's not going to cut it. And so I think, look, regardless of what your feelings about the mover, regardless of what your feelings about whether some of these things are already have already been included in previous motions, there is nothing here that can do us any harm. And there's an awful lot here that can do us some good.
Can I ask a question, procedural question, just about the petition that we've just received tonight? How long would it be for us to take to write a report in response to that? Talking of the responsiveness, how long would it take to respond to that petition?
So through you, Lord Mayor, there are elements of that petition that would require review. So it would require an evidence-based approach, analysing all of the data that has been described and discussed tonight. So I would say that it would be unlikely that it would be done within sort of 4 weeks. I think, again, you'll recall, Lord Mayor, that the process that we took around North Hobart did take some time. I would suggest that this response to the petition would require the same level of engagement with businesses, residents, and also obviously the analysis of the data to look at making the best recommendation to Council going forward. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Lord Mayor, can I just ask a supplementary question, very similar to yours but a little bit more nuanced? So this motion is do you think that, through you to the CEO, this motion is responding to what we've just heard from the petition in a way, and it would help your response to the petition as well? You see some value in this, particularly number 2?
So through you, Lord Mayor, there are elements of that question that require me to comment on the bona fides of the motion. I won't do that tonight, that's not my role. However, I will say that there are certainly elements of that petition that would be covered off in the motion, as is there already work that has commenced that would deal with the same issue. And if I might just give the example of the free or reduced parking campaign that we ran recently, we've had terrific feedback from retailers about that. So there are a range of these things, as Alderman Sexton said, and Deputy Lord Mayor, that are in train. This will obviously result in a comprehensive report back to Council at some stage.
Good,
Lord Mayor.
Alderman Barakis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And look, I'll start with a couple of questions, and I'm glad that the CEO brought up the reduced rate promotion or initiative. So to the relevant, whether it's you, CEO, or whoever, that initiative to offer half rate parking for a temporary period of time, what was the intentions of that? What goal was that intended to achieve?
So through you, again, Lord Mayor, you will recall, Alderman, that we did actually have a report come as a supplementary item to Council that was part of a COVID recovery package, and in fact Deputy Lord Mayor referenced that report earlier. It was to look at a range of initiatives that we could run quite immediately that would alleviate some of the burden of people coming into town, but really focused on shopping campaigns, and that's what we've done. So one was with the bikes, for instance, to Salamanca, which was discussed earlier, and similarly we've had another campaign running around the reduced parking rates as well. And as Mr Carr said, there's more to come in terms of that app expansion, as well as it relates to the sort of voucher system. Thanks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you for that. And so look, not to put words in anybody's mouth, but I sort of take that and extrapolate that to mean that if reducing or halving the parking fee for a limited time is aimed at reducing the burden on shoppers or reducing the burden on businesses, then our current rates do the opposite of that. Look, I think jumping off what... Actually, I do have one more other question. I'm not sure who's best to ask it. The 3,700 odd petition, would that be the largest petition we've received in recent times?
No. In recent times, yes.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I'd need to take that on notice. I would make the point that that's not all local residents either. It's a mix of visitors and locals.
And as are many of the petitions that we get. I think the cable car would have had a mix, and I think the height limits one would have had a mix as well. But the look, I'll jump off what Alderman Sexton said, because I think he raised a lot of good points. And as far as our responsiveness, as far as the perception, as has been said, we've had a range of motions and a range of discussions about parking. We've had a range of discussions about parking in North Hobart. and also broadly. And as the Deputy Lord Mayor has said, there's certain things that are in train or in hand, whatever that's to mean. But since that time and since these motions have been passed and since these things have been in hand, 3,700 people have signed a petition calling on us to initiate urgent action to address this issue. I agree with what Alderman Thomas and others have said.
Thank heavens.
And others. Have said, regarding the wholeheartedly, actually, regarding the range of issues that are causing some of the hurt amongst business community and amongst the local economy. It's not just parking. There's whether it's various council policies, whether it's the current economic state due to COVID, due to lockdowns, due to travel restrictions, but there is a certain element that is due to council's policies on parking. I think that's evident in the feedback that's come out of North Hobart when the changes were made to North Hobart, and almost immediately the feedback was that things are improving in that area. This isn't a policy on the run motion, as has been said. We're not doing it because we feel like we're doing it. This is based off a long period of concern raised by members of the community. 3,700 people. I believe council's done made many more drastic decisions and taken much more drastic action based on petitions with about a third of this. There's we've had policy on the run just in this particular council meeting, so and attempting to claw money from developers on the spot. So this is a motion that is calling on a body of work to be done to look at some solutions to address the broad parking issue, similar to what was done in North Hobart. But we're not doing anything. We're not doing anything to that. We're not voting to hood all the parking meters in the city. We're not voting on whether to give everybody free parking forever. This is a motion to evaluate. It's a motion to come back to us with some advice. But it's ultimately a motion to address the issues that have been raised by many members of the community. This debate's happened, I think, since I've been on council anyway, and I'm sure Alderman Zuko might say it's gone on for a lot longer than that, but as far as the topic of parking. And when people have made the comment publicly that I'm not going to shop in Hobart anymore because the parking's too ridiculous or the parking's too expensive, certain people around this table will say, oh, that's just a bunch of trolls or whatever's on social media saying whatever they say. We can't really take that into consideration. We have 3,700 people that have signed a petition. And whilst they might not all be residents, these are people that these are the same people that are driving into the city to use the services, to use the businesses that our city thrives off. So just because somebody in Clarence has signed a petition saying that the parking in Hobart's ridiculous, that's one less person that's going to come into the city. That's one less person that's going to shop in a local business, that's going to pay rates, that's ultimately paying for the budget that this council has. So, Lord Mayor, this is something that I think, as Alderman Sexton said, there's no downsides to doing this. If there's a body of work that's already underway to address some of the issues on parking, let this add to that, because this is one of the issues that I think the broader public has rightfully raised as one of the big issues at the moment. This is a body of work that will go a long way to addressing some of those concerns. And I know there's the talk that there's this is in hand or this is in hand and we just need to wait. Lord Mayor, we had a initiative to increase parking in North Hobart that was voted on, I think it was either at the end of 2018 or 2019, to upgrade Lefroy Street. And we've only had or seen meaningful action on that in the last couple of months. So I think it's very easy to say that we've got this in hand and there's a council motion or a council initiative that's approved some work to be done, so we just need to wait for that to happen. We've voted on initiatives to address parking that have not been acted on for years and years and years until they eventually have. And I'm glad that we do finally have some movement on that, because I think it will go a long way to addressing the parking issues in that particular area. But this is an opportunity to take seriously and to listen and to address the concerns.
That's nearly time.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To address some of the concerns that are raised by thousands of people in Hobart and around Hobart, and the people that are helping all the people that are contributing to the rates and to the businesses and to the vibrancy of their city. So I'd be encouraging everybody to support this. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Look, I do understand the comments that have been made around the table today, but I think something that Alderman Zuko said earlier, it really rings important to me in this particular motion, which was, once you've got a policy, things are very clear. He said this about this particular amendment because we didn't have a policy on this particular issue to do with developers contributing. He also said, it's not the way we do things. This is not the way we operate. As I said, the reason why I withdrew this amendment, because it was all about policy. Having sensible policy, as Alderman Baraka said at this particular amendment, having sensible policy that is responsible and implemented in an intelligent manner. That's what we need. So, this is a policy issue. This is a governance issue. So let's have a look at this. In the North Hobart report, we responded to say that we are continuing to look at this across the city. So when we talk about we have to now, right now, show that we are listening, we are doing that. We're doing that right now. We're showing them that we are listening from the North Hobart report. And there was two parts to that. It was the operational aspect and it was the policy framework that decides all of our issues with regards to parking. So we have the all fees and charges that are reviewed as part of the budget process, and we all went to these off-site parking workshops. Some even agreed to these parking increases, from my recollection. Number two, this is a policy framework. So the citywide settings that we need to put in place and manage as a whole, not a street by street or a suburb by suburb, but that holistic perspective. And it comes back to what Alderman Zuko said before. Once you've got a policy, things are very clear. We're doing that right now. We're asking for a policy and it's going to come back. It's October. We've maybe got at maximum about 5 or so meetings left this year, and then it will be 2022. We're doing it right now. We're listening right now. That is in the review of the draft policy from 2018. And if we look at, so say for example in Salamanca, from 2018 to 19 in Salamanca, that was when the changes came in. 2019 to 20, no changes. 2020-21, no changes. 2021-22, that's when the changes occurred. But the off-street parking has stayed the same since 2018. So now if we look at this particular policy that actually is coming into effect, what does it actually have within it? This policy that's so important, because once we've got a policy, things are very clear, and we need sensible policy, and we need to make responsible and intelligent choices. So what are these? There's about 20 or 30 different elements that's contained in the draft policy, and that things ranging from disability, on and off street parking, suburban parking, precincts, benefit districts, park and ride, business support initiatives, technology, all of which are already contained within points 2, 3 and 4 of this motion. So now when we talk about number 3, let's have a look at that. We're even progressing that. Alderman Sexton said, I don't know how we're progressing that. What are we doing in that regard for that? Well, I'll tell you what it is, but we've been on council, we should already know this. What are we doing? What we're doing is the Easy Park as the digital platform. What else are we doing? We received the clear advice from the AARB, which is an independent report, for shopper dockets. And it covered things like delivery, and it's an ongoing discussion about delivery, so that how we would deliver it, how we would manage it. This is already taking place through campaigns of Easy Park and using digital vouchers. We're doing something right now. This is a governance issue. It makes us look terribly bad when we're doing policy on the run. We actually are. It's already in place. Point 4, again, policy setting. Point 2, again, it's a policy draft in the policy drafting bucket. So if we look at point 2, 3 and 4, we have the budget variance reports every month. We have the review every year. Again, it happens quarterly and it comes to council. We are doing something right now. We're listening to the community. And these are stock standard policy developments that we're actually putting into place. It's going to come about, going to do community consultation. So I don't understand. I really don't. I'm appalled at something like this. And all I see, for me, that's going to come in the summary of this particular motion. Sorry, can I have 1 minute extension, please?
Seconded by Councillor Harvey. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously.
All I can see that will be the summary, which is what I'm hypothesising, is that all the summary will say about is a somewhat attempt at discounting what I've just said. But those are the facts. And for those who are actually voting for this, are actually going against good governance, are actually contradicting themselves about going policy is really important, yet voting against it. I don't understand. And the summary to me, in my mind, will be simply this. Points that will outline that in reality, all this particular motion is showing us that this is for a political spin. This is for
Lord Mayor. I want that withdrawn. It's not political spin. This has been done in consultation with the Hobart Parking Group. They've been insisting I do something. I'm tired of this person doing that. She called me a monkey here once, and I'm tired of this type of crap.
Alderman Zuko, that was an unnecessary outburst.
And that was an unnecessary outburst too.
I'm sorry, that is not a point of order for somebody to make an observation that this is for political headlines or whatever it was. That I'm sorry, that is not a point of order, and that is my ruling, because there are those sort of accusations made around this table all the time, but there was no need
by you as well, Lord Mayor.
Okay. Interrupting now, can I continue? That's what I thought. Thank you very much. So for me, the summary, all it will entail is what I just said before, and all of this serves this motion. It's no real purpose, other than being divisive. That's all it's doing. And it's really, really tainting the work that our officers are already doing. And I find it really bizarre that there's actually no advice at the bottom of this motion. So how am I supposed to be guided on this?
Councillor Sherlock. Further discussion? Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to make a few introductory comments to begin with first. Firstly, the point was made that we have to defend and explain the decision of the council. And I do that constantly, and I suppose all of us as elected members do that all the time. I have hundreds of people who come to my cafe, and I have to explain to them all the time. So we do that, and I find it a pleasure at times. Secondly, the point was made that we've got to do it now. Now, it is my understanding that we did that yesterday, not now. We have already begun a review. Let me quote this to you. On the 21st of August, the CEO made the following statement in the paper. A potential overhaul of the parking across the city will be done. Then it said further, reviewing parking arrangements to help businesses hurt by border restrictions. There are a number of other points made in here. So what I'm saying is this, that it's not that we are not listening. We have already heard. The CEO has already implemented or put this in motion. It has begun. Point number one is saying the motion has 4 elements, and element 1 is saying let us re-evaluate. So what this is doing is already, this is in review, it's here. The CEO has already begun, the whole train is in motion, so it's been happening. It is very similar to the taste of Tasmania, when the motion was already there. Number 2, the CEO provide delegation, etc., etc. Now, I am the elected member. It is my view that we as elected members must make that decision. It is not a decision that I want to delegate to someone else. Point number 3, element 3 says a possibility of a shop and save. Again, the Director, Innovative and Technology has made it very clear to us that there is in train already something to that effect, which is called Easy Park. And then number 4 looks at the re-establishment of a parking fund. Now, I don't know the history of it, what was it all about, and I need to be enlightened on that. Thank you.
Further discussion?
Just a question through you to the Councillor Dutta, if that's okay. So he just indicated that he wanted further information of 4. He won't get that unless that 4 is agreed with. So is he suggesting that we vote on individual parts of the motion? He's not suggesting that?
Councillor Dutta.
Thank you, Chair. No, the element 4 is saying that the CEO also provide a report that evaluates establishment of a parking fund similar to the previous one. All what I'm saying, I don't know what the previous one was. You know, maybe others who have been here for longer would be able to tell me what it is. That's what I was asking for.
That's what the report's for.
That's the report.
Okay. All right. I think we don't have to have a across the table discussion about it. Is there further discussion? No further discussion. Can I ask a couple of questions, please? I don't know who was around. I don't know what the CEO was, maybe for some, but can someone enlighten me about the number of council workshops we had in the lead up to setting our budget this year?
Lord Mayor, it was 3.
So 3 council workshops, and what was the attendance like at those council workshops in terms of number of councillors?
Lord Mayor, I can't recall the exact numbers, but I do think the attendance was quite strong.
And in those 3 council workshops to set our budget, did the topic of parking fees and setting our parking fees come into the discussions at those workshops?
Yes, Lord Mayor, it did.
So I guess my concern about this motion is around governance and good governance practice. And my questions relate to the setting of our budget, which is our job as elected members, is to set our budget annually. Good governance involves setting a budget based on evidence, based on collaborative discussion, based on the team having consideration of a whole range of information and evidence from our specialist advisors. I remember the discussion about parking. I remember our advisors saying, are you willing to set parking based on good evidence, good policy, running it properly, in the case of some of the off-street parking, doing it like a business? Will you let us get on with the job? And everyone around that table said, yes, we will, because we are here to set policy based on good governance, based on developing strategies. One good thing I've been noticing recently is that this council is doing a lot more good planning, good thinking about the future, and thinking about decision making based on strategic planning, rather than sort of ad hoc motions and sort of random decisions in the chamber and sort of going here, there and everywhere. And that is important, because that is about the reputation of this organisation, of this city, and the good governance of this city. And our budget for 2021 was developed through a series of workshops, through good discussion, and we put pressure on our staff to make $6 million worth of cuts. $6 million. That was a very, very difficult time. We talk about giving our officers room to move. They can be creative and go out and spend more time talking to traders, etc. They do that all the time, but we also gave them a very tough job of cutting this budget by $6 million. And we set the budget and we said, go and do your work for a year. We'll come back to you next year and we'll look at the budget again. And now, less than 6 months after we've approved the budget, we're saying, no, 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 actually we want to change all of that. We want to change all of that because...
Point of order.
Point of order. What is the point of order?
The point of order, Lord Mayor, you're referring to the budget I'm not referring. This motion does not refer to providing any discounts off the budget.
That's not a point of order. That's a point of clarification. My view is that this motion, which is about reviewing all of our parking fees, is going to have budgetary implications.
That's political spin.
No, it's not, Alderman Briscoe.
Well,
and if there was advice under this motion, it would tell us this would have budget.
Political spin.
Changing the parking fees mid-term would have budget implications, and it would. No, excuse me, Alderman Briscoe, could you stop interrupting me? It is my view that if we're talking about changing parking fees, it is about changing the budget.
Political spin. You've agreed that the word political spin was allowed to be used.
Alderman Briscoe.
Point of order.
This is
Point of order.
Can I have the...
Point of order. Lord Mayor, a councillor is speaking, you are speaking, and you are being interrupted and distracted. And I think that should not be allowed. This should not be allowed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Please, Alderman Briscoe, I'm warning you to stop interrupting me and let me have my say, please.
Lord Mayor, you don't take points of order on any of your speeches. You should allow, say, the deputy to take over.
That's not what the rules say. Please take your seat.
Okay, so
allow me to
the
finish
other
my
way we can make
intervention.
comment about
Allow
your
me
speech.
Allow me to finish my intervention, please.
That's your right, but it's still political spin.
Okay. So these are my concerns with the governance of these kind of motions. It is policy on the run. Councillor Sherlock is absolutely right. We set the budget, we did that work, and now we're throwing it all up to say let's sort of review it all again. I'm not surprised that there is 3,700 electronic signatures on a petition that was sponsored through paid advertising on Facebook for months. I think we should possibly think about doing a test here about what is our governance culture like in this place. Maybe we should sponsor a petition calling for half-price rates and sponsor it and see how many people who would like to sign a petition saying let's have our rates cut by 50%. I guarantee you will have 3,500, 5,500, 10,500. Of course people will say they want free parking, free rates, no taxes. You know, this is easy policy, but what we're here to do isn't necessarily easy policy. It is about balancing a whole range of issues, and that includes management of the city, management of the streets, management of the parking spaces based on evidence and data and good expert advice. And I think that this motion is my third and final concern is that this motion, like a number of motions that come to this chamber, is surplus to requirements. We have just received this petition in question. The petition will be responded to. It will have a report. This additional motion is really just to kind of hang on the coattails of the petition and is not really required because a report will be forthcoming. And I believe that good governance would be sticking with our budget, taking the petition, responding in a timely manner to the petition with good policy, and that is all that we need to do. So I cannot support a motion that has some really random requests, things like shop and save Victoria Gardens. It doesn't tell me where Victoria Gardens is. Re-establishment of a parking fund, that's a big piece of work. That's a massive piece of work. Our staff already have a lot of work on their plate, and this is asking a big grab bag of one particular set of ideas that seemed like a good idea when the motion was written. For the good governance reasons, I won't be supporting this motion tonight. Alderman Zuko, would you like to sum up?
Yes, Lord Mayor. You should know where Victorian Gardens were. Lord Mayor, you were in the workshop about 3 years ago and I mentioned it and I explained exactly where it was. It's where IKEA is in Richmond. Quite obviously you don't recall. Lord Mayor, there is a number of things that really actually quite are amusing. Let's talk about policy and let's talk about this motion. I'm not seeking that this is a policy that we're implementing. I'm just seeking that a report comes forward. The difference between my debate in regards to a planning matter is that we were trying to implement a charge that we didn't have in policy. That's the difference between this motion and the previous motion. I'm only seeking here, Lord Mayor, that the General Manager proceed with an action, not to develop anything other than a report to come back for us to give consideration to. That is not policy. And I asked a question, Lord Mayor, in regards to why were the meters implemented in the first instance. Mr Carr nearly got it right. The original reason, Lord Mayor, was to control the parking spaces. Now, Mr Carr also said that there's between 4,500 sensors in the streets. Well, in reality, the sensors are the things that actually control the parking spaces now. So the original intent of the parking meters back in the 60s was to control the parking, but now with sensors, we don't really need the car parking meters anymore. But I'm not after that anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in. Lord Mayor, we talk about good governance. Good governance is listening to our customers. The petition you talk about with 3,700 done online would be no similar to the one that was done by Hobart Not High Rise many years ago, which gave us over $100,000 in expenditure to have a public meeting. So let's not be selective in our approach, Lord Mayor. And of course, yes, I was part of those workshops, and I'm also the Chair of Finance, and I voted for this decision to increase the parking meters. But a good business person, like I've been, would say, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Hobart, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Just like I got wrong, my chef got the thing wrong on cooking the steak well done, I will rectify it. I'm endeavouring to rectify something that we got wrong. Yes, I'm not after Lord Mayor, for us to go and actually smack the budget to pieces. No, Lord Mayor, I'm seeking a review to reevaluate, to have a look at it. Now, so far as Victoria Gardens goes, again, I've got to repeat it. I brought that forward nearly 4 years ago. What we get, Lord Mayor, is constantly talking about what's on an app. Everyone doesn't use an app, Lord Mayor, and I think we've got to understand that if we're going to be customer focused, we can't have everything on an app. Everyone that is not on digital because we have an ageing population. Then let's get real. Let's do things that our customers want, not what we want, or whether or not a group of elected members want to be politically grandstanding because Zuko's put the motion up.
All right, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Show of hands. All those in favour.
Alderman Zuko, Alderman Sexton, Councillor Coates, Alderman Barakis, Alderman Thomas, Alderman Briscoe.
Against.
Councillor Harvey, Councillor Dutta, Councillor Sherlock, Deputy Lord Mayor and the Lord Mayor. It's carried, Lord Mayor, 6 votes to 5.
Okay, moving on to item 11. Councillor Harvey.
Item 11, Lord Mayor. I'll move the item.
Alderman Barakis.
This is the an initiative to reduce plastic waste in the city. The city's been approached by local tourism operator Mr Robert Pennicott to discuss opportunities for collaborative approaches to reduce waste, in particular the reduction of single-use plastic water bottles within the waterfront tourist precinct of the city. It's proposed that the CEO explore opportunities for the possible implementation of a program addressing the reduction of single-use plastic water bottles, which in turn could achieve the multiple outcomes of reducing plastic waste and the harmful impacts that those bottles may have on the environment. This would be a collaborative program and will only be pursued if successful, with contributions of the local operators within the waterfront precincts, and the program would not pursue any regulatory process such as restrictions on sale of water. We all know, Lord Mayor, that we have probably the best water in Australia. I think that we could claim that, and we also know that we have a good background, a good history of reducing single-use plastics and reducing the number of single-use water bottles across the waterfront within the tourism sector, I think would be another good achievement for Hobart in its quest to have a zero waste to landfill achieved by 2030. So I'm very supportive of this, and Robert Pennicott is keen to work with the council to help roll out a strategy, and the CEO hopefully will be able to work with him and whoever across the waterfront to achieve a goal of reduced single-use plastic water bottles.
Further discussion, Alderman Barakis.
Mayor, just quickly, I was notably one of the people in this room that voted against the single-use plastic ban, but I'd happily support any initiative that encourages voluntary and collaborative measures to reduce waste, so I'm happy to support this.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, Lord Mayor,
Zuko?
I'm going to support it. I think it's a great idea that it's going to help the Hobart Waterfront Precinct. I'm just wondering, you might have a concern here because this is to give the Chief Executive Officer authorisation to do something. Unfortunately, I think Councillor Dutta can't support this. On his last comment.
Okay, Alderman Zuko.
Why? People want to be smart, I can be smart too.
Oh, I thought he was asking.
I'm not asking your question. No way.
Let's keep moving on. Alderman Briscoe, did you want to make a
Yes, Lord
comment?
Mayor. Look, I would support this. I thought the city had a number of water stations around the waterfront anyway, so perhaps I could ask how many water stations, drinking fountains that we've got around the waterfront.
Lord Mayor, I'm unable to give a definitive number. Certainly the city has drinking fountains throughout its parks. There are not a lot across the waterfront, however, and included in this initiative would be drinking fountains, but importantly drinking fountains with bottle fillers.
Yes.
A number of the fountains we have are of an older design and do need to be replaced.
So one action could be the CEO could investigate putting more water fountains with taps or something that they could actually fill up a water bottle. Yep, thank you.
Okay, further discussion. I'll put that.
Just a question, Lord Mayor, sorry. Just a question. This motion has come to us through a committee where it was discussed and debated?
Yes.
And not just come to council without any debate?
No.
Thank you.
Still authorising the General Manager to do something.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no.
Hypocrisy
Carried unanimously. Right, I'm moving on to item 12 and I'm declaring an interest, so I'll leave you guys to it.
No.
I apologise.
No, I've got nothing on this one.
Right, move item 12.
To move the item. Oh, sorry, we've got the chair here.
The chair. Councillor Sherlock.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief today.
Alderman Harvey, I think. Oh,
Councillor
sorry,
Harvey.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Councillor Briscoe.
Go ahead.
Alderman Briscoe.
Please, just go
So
ahead.
the 5 points are there, as everybody can see. I'll be very quick. The annual round of the City of Hobart Grants program contained 4 grant categories: Creative Hobart, Major Cultural Organisations, Event Partnership, Community Christmas Carols and Urban Sustainability. The response to this round was particularly strong, with a number of very well thought out, high calibre applications, and this made the panel's deliberations all the more difficult, but equally rewarding to see how well regarded the city's grant program is. 3 applications under the Creative Hobart Major Cultural Organisation, 6 under the Event Partnership Grant, and the authority to approve the Community Christmas Carols and Urban Sustainability is delegated to the CEO, with the outcome to be reported to the committee.
Thank you. Further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Items carried unanimously.
Okey-doke. So item 13, Economic and Development Committee, Alderman Thomas.
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'll put the motion on the books.
Seconded by Councillor Sherlock.
Lord Mayor, I hope there's some good debate on this because Mr Short's waited all night for an item and I'm sure this will be the one that'll bring a lot more attention. There's no car parks involved in this. This is a report to Council on a project that's been running for a number of years, Lord Mayor, that was presented to the Economic and Development Committee at its last meeting. It's actually quite significant because it requires Mr Short's area to bring back to this council a recommendation of quite some import because it now goes back to a number of years since we had the Antarctic Winter Festival and we found some surviving huskies and made them run through the streets instead of through the snow, and we did a range of things to encourage the city's involvement with the Antarctic and the Antarctic Gateway. We then had Mawson's Hut created, and we then had some other activities, including a reception up until COVID in the town hall. But I think we have this requires us to move from a position of being one of the 5 gateway cities and to decide whether or not we want to be more than that. So decide whether or not as part of the city deal, which will see the new Antarctic and Science Precinct at Macquarie Point, this council will lead its community in terms of a greater involvement with the Antarctic region. And it's a significant issue because anything more we do will be a cost. And I think part of the report's going to need to explore whether or not, because we just happen to be a gateway where ships leave from, and admittedly we have through the Australian government and other stakeholders, including the polar network of some 90 businesses, attempted on a number of occasions to make sure we had a bigger presence of the Chinese and the Koreans that I represent, and of course the French for a long time, and the Australian Antarctic. What do we want from this? We heard more recently, Lord Mayor, that Tasports may have an issue in terms of the continuing engagement with Antarctica because of port space, and of course we have the new ship, as the Deputy spoke of earlier on, coming in. So there is going to be a role for this council to really strategically look at what we are going to do in this area. Are we going to continue to have the flags occasionally and the reception next door, or are we going to change our attitude and become much more involved together with the scientists in the city and engage in a variety of organisations? Are we going to be just giving lip service, which I'm afraid to say I think we have up until this point, or are we going to engage in a greater, more collaborative, more scientific and more conservation way? Because this report calls on us to do just that. It calls on us to take a greater leadership to work with those other cities. And I suggest that this report is going to be quite a difficult one to write because it's going to raise a number of issues, not least of all will be our commitment to being more than a flag waver when a ship leaves. So I would ask that people really get engaged with this, but we do, I think, although it doesn't have this in this matter, it would be good if we could have some time period for the return of this report, because if the eyes of these 4 other cities are on us, it may well be something we do need to decide sooner rather than later.
Further discussion? No discussion?
Well, no, I do have a question for Alderman Thomas. So how imperative...
These aren't my feelings, by the way.
What's the sense of the competition to be the Antarctic Gateway across those other several, cities that we're competing with? Or are we partnering with them?
I'll give my comment, but I'll also defer to the director through you, Lord Mayor. Up until, my understanding is that each strategically, because of their location geographically to the Antarctic, negates that to a degree. Because, for example, the South American Gateway is where the cruisers go from because it's much closer, to get to the Antarctic as a tourism region. Christchurch, as another example, there is more fuel efficiencies from running from there for the Americans, and they have a strategic relationship. Whereas with Fremantle has often sought to position itself as a competitor to Hobart in this regard. So geographically, a lot of differences, but maybe Mr. Short, you might have something else to say.
Lord Mayor, through you, and I think Alderman Thomas, you're quite right. It's really a case of co-opetition between the 5 international gateways. They each have a geographic advantage.
You say co-opetition?
Competition.
There you go.
Each port has its own distinct geographic advantage, and so depending on where countries have their base or their research on the Antarctic continent, specific gateways perform best for those countries.
Competition.
I ask a question. This is not a feeling question, but where does China, what port does China come out of?
Short.
Through you, Lord Mayor, I think China tends to use different ports on different occasions. I understand it does use Cape Town at times. I think it's used Christchurch at times, but I don't think it has a fixed international departure point.
Okay, and I seem to recall the French are pretty keen on Hobart, aren't they? I presume for a lot of cultural reasons. Other than that, some seminar or some thing I went to a couple of years ago now, elsewhere in the world, went to a seminar about towns in the Arctic Circle that corroborate to do with the Arctic Circle, and if we can not be seen as the chairman has pointed out here, we're not seen to be a competitor, but we're a partner. If we go into the competition thing, that we'll lose because we won't have the resources to compete against some of these bigger cities. The other thing that struck me is that whilst we are partnering, that from our COVID safe status, then that could be a competitive advantage as well. So presume the South Cape Town may not be so attractive anymore, and places in South America probably aren't either. So we communicate with the federal government about this matter and what their strategic views are. Through you, Lord Mayor.
Short.
Lord Mayor, through you, in relation to expeditioners and programs coming through the city, we certainly have a close relationship with the Australian Antarctic Division of the federal government, so we really take their lead through the division, but certainly they give us advance warning when a new delegation may be coming through the port. And we go to a lot of effort as officers to make sure that those crews feel quite welcome when they come to the city. And so, for example, last year, both the Italians and the French had to quarantine in hotels in Hobart, and the city made sure that each expeditioner had a letter of welcome from the city, together with a basket of fruit on their arrival in their quarantine room.
Good, thank you. I was also trying to get the feel that is there a strategic policy outlook from the federal government to do with this area?
Lord Mayor, through you, I believe there is. I don't know that we are privy to it at this stage, and I think looking at the way world affairs are at the moment, some of those strategic priorities will change.
Yep.
I think that's one of the reasons why in the report, Lord Mayor, we've highlighted that the city deal and the emphasis in the city deal around Hobart's status as an Antarctic gateway is so critical at this time.
Yep. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Did you want to sum up?
Look, it's breaking rules. Lord Mayor, Camellar is also, because it's new evidence, but Camellar is of course here, so it's a conservation, the enormous, up at the old Hutchins School. So I think we had the bones, it was good to hear the debate. I think we have the bones of potentially a new policy here or a new attitude, but it will need the strength and conviction of this council to become involved, noting also that, as I did say in the earlier address, having 90 plus businesses which are totally involved with the polar network, including everything from igloos and all sorts of different commodities, and Fremantle doesn't have it. I think we've got, of course, the Hobart Airport upgrade, which provides to the ice runways on the continent. So there's significant start points for us, which I think the city should certainly explore, and I'm sure we'll get a very good report back. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. That brings to the end of our open meeting. I'll close the... Oh, someone could move. We move into the closed portion. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Alderman Baraka.